Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Stephen Grace from the University of East London, and UEL and ULCC are organising this session today. So welcome to you all in the room, and welcome to everybody that's at home or in their office joining us remotely. Since I don't work here, Rory McNichol is going to give us the housekeeping arrangements, just in case we need to make a comfort break or whatever. Probably don't need to do that into the microphone. I'll mime.
We're not expecting a fire alarm, so out the door, down the stairs, and congregate in Russell Square on the corner there. And the toilets are through the same. Sorry.
Right. So I wasn't intending to be giving this little talk. Rachel's not here, who we thought might have been doing it. So Rachel, hi. Sorry, you're not here. So on the 27th of June, we had the second or third EPrints User Group up in Leeds. The notes of which are all on a document on Google Drive, and I'm sure I can't give you that link off the top of my head, but I'm sure you can find it, or we'll send a link to it onto the Google group mailing list if you can't find it. I'm not really sure what I'm meant to be telling you now. The group happened. There was various things that were sort of presented on Iris, IR stats, altmetrics, REOCs were all discussed. We had some breakout groups around research data, open access, impact, measuring impact of our research, some getting started kind of beginner's guides to ePrints, this kind of stuff was discussed, and there was also a breakout group discussing cover sheets that I was involved with, so I don't know what happened in the other ones. I'm sure they're all great. For the cover sheets, I know there was an action that we were going to meet. We had a virtual meeting, about two of us had a virtual meeting, I'm not quite sure it's a meeting. And we discussed the pros and cons of cover sheets and what it might take to add these to the system, add them to ePrints. We haven't reported back officially on that. It's a pain, but if you want to do it, you can do it. One of the things that were the actions from the meeting was to stick all the presentations online. They're online, the links in the Google document. And I think other than that, unless anyone's got any other massive bits of feedback or information from the last user group, that's about what I've got to say at the minute. I'll be back later.
Thanks, John. Just a reminder that the hashtag is hashtag EPrintsUG, and there's a collaborative document underway for today's meeting at bit.ly EPrintsUG 130115. Capital E, capital P, capital U, capital G. It's on screen for those of you that can see it. Next, we're going to go over to Valerie McCutcheon in Glasgow, who's going to be giving us an open access update. Come in, Glasgow.
Hello, can you hear me? Sort of tell people a little bit about what we've been doing with regards to open access. Hopefully most people in the room and online will be aware of the JISC Open Access Pathfinder project going. If not, the link is on the slide, which has now come up on the screen. Here, let me have a look. I've got a pointer, okay, there's a pointer. So there's a link here to the JISC Open Access Pathfinder project. There's a whole series of projects going on. Hopefully we'll have lots of things to share, along with all the various JISC initiatives that are going on in the open access space There's quite a lot of activity, so hopefully we can join a lot of things up. So we have our own project within that suite of Pathfinder projects, which is called End to End, and it's a collaboration between Kent, Lancaster, Southampton and Glasgow, and EPrints services as well. I'm going to tell you a wee bit more about that project specifically, but please bear in mind there are a whole suite of projects, so if there's nothing for you in our project, there probably is in the other projects, and I would urge you to go and have a little look at what the different projects are doing on this website here. Okay, so this is just a sort of sketchy picture that I've used many times of our systems at Glasgow, and we're kind of reasonably smug that we've got nicely joined up systems. You can see we've got our various core systems linked together, and the dotted line in the middle here, round about the research system and the Enlighten Institutional Repository, which is our EPrints repository, indicates that in 2010 we actually brought our repository into the fold of the core systems and linked that in with our research system. So that's something we did a number of years ago. And on our institutional repository we primarily have publications, but we also increasingly have data sets, artwork, exhibitions, etc. And all of that is reviewed by library staff. I know that different people have different manifestations of EPrints and different processes. Some of it has quality control applied at different places. But in Glasgow we have a repository team that checks the metadata for each of these things as it comes into our system. And the dotted line here, just round about the finance and research system, is just to indicate that these two systems are being brought together and they'll be further integrated. But fundamentally, it's the same data that's going to live on these two systems, it's just they're going to be further integrated. So then, if I go on to having a look at our process, again, we've got a big smiley face on this one because we're quite pleased with ourselves. We really feel that we have got our process reasonably well organised. We have a very low barrier process for our researchers, and basically we just ask them to email us when they have a paper accepted, and the library team check all of the funder details, what the publication allows, what payments are required, and we'll do as much admin as we possibly can. I know that some other organisations do devolve to colleges, some of them have forms. It is very labour intensive for us, but we feel that that economy of scale is great and that works for the University of Glasgow, but we could do the whole thing a whole lot more efficiently, and that's where the sad face comes in. So this slide is supposed to sort of represent all the different systems where we keep data that we need for managing open access. So like many people, we've got our spreadsheet which has got lots of information on it. We're currently running two spreadsheets. One where we have used the new JISC spreadsheet that was provided for the Charities Open Access Fund, but we're still running a separate spreadsheet for Research Council UK and other funders because that Charities Open Access spreadsheet came in partway through our Research Council UK year. So hopefully come April we'll bring it all together a bit more. We've got our library serial system through which the finances are processed, and ultimately, hopefully they appear on the actual finance system as the Holy Grail official record of expenditure. We have dabbled with intermediary services, not with much success, but again, that's another area where data is stored. And of course, we have our repository. And in our sort of vision, which is only that really, we hope that all of the data can be brought together, perhaps in our repository more easily, and potentially by bringing information from publishers at an earlier stage, so getting information about the acceptance date, about the unique identifier for the article from the publishers early on, and linking that up with the other publication records in our repository and the financial information, so that we can do all of this reporting to Research Council UK, for REF, for Horizon 2020, and importantly all the local information that we need that isn't perhaps currently being bandied about in other forums, but we do actually need quite a number of bits of information that aren't necessarily on the REF spec, for example. And there's lots of data out there that we now need, new bits of information that we never had to report anywhere before. So either doesn't exist or it's scattered across all these different systems. And we're not really very sure of what all of the field definitions provided to us by Research Council UK or REF or Horizon 2020 necessarily mean. We need to pin that down. And also there's a lack of unique identifiers. So we've got internal transactions with lots of different identifiers. We've got published manuscripts with different identifiers, authors with different identifiers. All of these issues hopefully familiar to most of you. Okay, so this is just one example here of a specific publication in our system. So this publication here, this is the actual article payment charge. It's got a transaction number ending 360. But over here, it's got the VAT has a different transaction number, and the VAT is bundled in with a number of other VAT transactions for other APC cases. So it's very confusing and difficult and hard to line up the financial information with the publication information uniquely. And I certainly think that publishers can help us a lot with that. There's a lot to be done, and a lot being done by JISC initiatives and by other Pathfinder projects and individuals. So on to our end-to-end project and what we're doing. Well, a couple of the things that we're doing is that we're doing a couple of case studies. So we will be doing a case study on EPrints, which is very pertinent to this meeting, looking at how we deliver open access metadata and reporting through the EPrints platform. So that's one thing that we will be doing, and we urge people to work together with us on that. But also we will be producing via Lancaster a case study on the Hydra platform, because Lancaster are engaged with the Hull-led project under the Pathfinder umbrella, which is working on the Hydra platform. But what we would say is everything that we're doing, we're trying to make it specific deliverables for our systems to resolve our problems, but make the requirements as generic as possible. Make sure we're speaking the same language as people who have different systems, people who don't have systems, so that we can all compare apples with apples. Also in the project, we're doing a number of workshops. Some of you may have attended our first workshop, which was on the 4th of September. That's all on the website, which was on the first slide, so you can go and have a look at that if you've not seen that before. But at that workshop, what we did was we produced a spreadsheet for that workshop, and we did some work on metadata for open access broadly and try to identify what the key issues people had were. If they weren't things that we planned to do in our project, we passed them on to the Pathfinder projects that were working in that area. So this information has been shared and people are aware of it. Now, there was a workshop yesterday. I don't know if anyone in the room or online was at the workshop, looking at specifically at REF and REF metadata requirements. So again, there will be a report from that meeting coming out soon. And we're going to do a workshop on advocacy or engagement. That was something that came out strongly from our first workshop, but we are working with other Pathfinder projects who are also doing a lot in this area. So for example, UCL have a workshop planned, I think, for March, which has not yet been advertised. And we will be following on from that, so we'll be sort of working together to take forward whatever we require, whatever the community requires. And we will do a final workshop at the end of our project to try and work out what's left to be done, what are the still existing problems. This will be sort of May 2016, so we'll see where we are then. It'll be very interesting to see how the projects progress. But the crux of it, probably what we're looking at and what's on the agenda today is metadata specification. Very important, as you noted from my earlier messy, horrible slide with all the spreadsheets and different systems, that we have a clear idea of where we're going with metadata for open access, so that we can do better reporting both internally and for all of these external organisations here. What we're trying to do is we'll move on and have a bit of a chat about metadata, and David is indeed going to fill us in a bit more about the CASRI work just shortly. One of the other things that we're hoping to do, which is very pertinent to ePrints, is to improve award linkage functionality. At Glasgow and Southampton and probably other organisations, we do actually have award numbers integrated into our repository. This information here in Glasgow's example has got a proper funder reference here for Economic and Social Research Council linked to the individual publication, which is fully open access. But we've all kind of developed this in our own way. So what we'd like to do is work together with all of the organisations that have done anything on this and try and pull together a fairly standard ePrints offering there and get the best of each of our offerings and offer it to those people that don't have anything yet. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly touch on CASRAI because David is going to speak about that. But with regards to metadata, we have effectively two inputs at the moment. We have our open access metadata sheet that we've been using and updated after our workshop. And what we did with that spreadsheet was we looked at REOCs, we looked at REF requirements, Horizon 2020, local requirements. We consulted a number of different organisations and universities and got input to that. What we were left with was about 30 odd core open access fields on top of the standard ePrints publications fields. And also a lot of questions where we feel we have to go back and work with REOCs and REF and just clarify exactly what is wanted so that we can be crystal clear on that. What we're also working with now is CASRAI, the CASRAI process. So looking at how can we make a sort of national standard for for this metadata for open access that people can refer to. Importantly for me, I want it to be comprehensive whatever we do, whatever route we do and however we work together. It needs to be comprehensive. I can't just have something that covers just what Research Council or just what REF need. For our system and ePrints, we need everything that we need for open access. And we need one place where we can go and feel comfortable that is a list of everything that we need. So whether we deliver some of that through REOCs tools or whether we deliver that through one comprehensive ePrints system with some plugins for REOCs, etc., we still need to bash all of that out a bit more. And hopefully we will be doing a bit more work on that just shortly. And I'll leave David to tell you a bit more about CASRAI. So as I mentioned, we're doing this work with CASRAI, and I have coined the term CASRAIifying. You may have heard of serifying. Well, this is CASRAIifying, and what we're trying to do is use the CASRAI umbrella to come up with standard definitions and a generic technical spec for open access. Now there are lots of inputs, there's lots of different things going on, and this is where I think we do need to try and all work together and not duplicate effort. And indeed there is a meeting that some of you may be coming along to on Friday in Manchester that the JISC representatives here may tell you a bit more about, but we'll certainly make sure that's reported back to the ePrints community. And the idea behind that is to pull together the work that JISC have been doing on open access metadata with what we're doing in our institutions and what we're doing with ePrints so that we can make best use of our joint resources on that. We're very keen to have a sort of community build to avoid any replication. So whatever we come up with, as I mentioned, we do want it to be similar definitions. We might call it something else in Pure or ePrints, but we want to know that when I compare my field Y with your field X, that actually we mean the same thing. So I'm going to leave it there. Feel free to contact me if there's any questions for me, but I'm going to let David explain how CASRAI works. Thank you.
And the real requirement, we should be really pleased that the world has woken up to open access, but there's now a real requirement to gather a lot of information which needs to be expressed in systems. Of course, we're here at the EPrints User Group meeting, so we're most concerned about EPrints, but systems need to be able to handle the data surrounding open access in quite a complex way, and that neatly brings me on to welcome David Baker to talk about the CASRAI and the recent current work that CASRAI is undertaking. So thanks very much to Valerie.
And then I'll just switch to my slides?
Yeah, so here are your slides here.
Oh, wow, I'm fast. Okay, great, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm David Baker, Executive Director of CASRE. CASRE is a international nonprofit initiative targeting specifically the interoperability problem between systems. It isn't specific to any particular subject matter except the common theme of interoperability, with it being crucial that systems, as was mentioned, that have to hold data in order for us to do our business, they need to be able to connect up in some way. And at CASRE, we feel that that's not primarily a technology problem. That also brings in policy and business requirements into the mix. So I'm going to give a bit of an introduction to CASRE, as Valerie mentioned, and then go into specifics on some of the things in a CASRE JISC project that's currently, as Valerie said, if I can pronounce it correctly, CASREifying some of the requirements in the UK research community. So I thought I'd start with just a couple of example use cases that the UK group is trying to solve. As an institution preparing for ref submission, we need to ensure those of our publications which are in scope meet the repository deadline requirements so that we can remove any remaining compliance gaps before submitting. So that was the first use case that came forward in the working group, as this is something that we need to be able to do, and we don't have any easy way of doing it. And interoperability was a fundamental enabler for making this possible, because the information needed by the institution is not all within their immediate grasp. It's, as Valerie said, it's scattered across multiple systems. So that's one example of a use case that has interoperability at its core. Another, from a different perspective, from a funder's perspective, where they're collecting reports from funded institutions, the evaluation units need information on expenditure of funds related to the article processing charges in order to be able to effectively monitor their OA policy. And again, one of the patterns in interoperability use cases is there tends to be a consumer, if you will, who needs information from one or more producers that are not managed by them. So the sort of distribution between many databases, whether we're talking a current research information system or a repository or an HR system or a finance system, regardless of their labels, they are essentially databases. They're basically sitting on different platforms, storage mechanisms for being able to manage information. So that was another key use case, and the opportunity was clear from developing a single common profile, as Valerie mentioned, that both use cases could be supported through the creation of a single profile that could be reused for different purposes. Why CASRE? Well, as I said, interoperability is a key reason why we exist, trying to solve that problem. A lack of interoperability is a root cause of admin burden for researchers, research organizations, and any of the administrative units that are trying to get things done across multiple silos, if you will, siloed databases. So a root cause of admin burden and assessment blindness. If you're trying to evaluate or assess or get some sense of trends in the management or administration details in your day-to-day work, unless all of the data is in a place that you have control of, which it isn't, it's scattered across multiple places, you aren't getting the full picture. If you need data to assess, you need the data, and it's spread around. So that's why not only for reducing the admin burden, but also gaining access to the information that's needed to be able to answer those questions. And what's needed in trying to solve the interoperability problem is some agreement mechanism, and it needs to be sustainable. This is key. There's different ways that could be approached other than the approach that CASRE advocates, and one way is that if every stakeholder just decided to use the same system. So for example, in the case of EPrints, if EPrints was the only software solution, we would have less of an issue, because there's you know what everybody else around the world or within the nation is going to be using, so that's easier. But that's not feasible, it's not practical, It might be great for the people running that software system, but from a standpoint of innovation and diversity, there's going to be multiple tools. There's going to be different software systems in place. They have different value propositions for the people that need to use them. So we don't think the agreement layer is, let's all decide to use the same software. If you move away from that level, you could decide to all use the same storage model, if you will, or sort of a storage blueprint, the data model that you use. That's a little bit more flexible than forcing everyone to use the same software product. But again, it also has some downsides in terms of restrictions, in terms of stopping any kind of innovation. New things will be invented, new ways of managing data, new ways of storing data, connected graphs, relational systems. We shouldn't make it necessary to sort of freeze everything that we do into one way of looking at things in order for us to be interoperable. So we don't think that solving this problem by forcing agreement on the exact data model that's used for storage is the approach. What we think the optimum layer is reaching agreement on the meaning in the information that's stored in our different databases, first of all. So what terms are we using? What kind of objects or entities are we referring to? People, organizations, publications, books, the different things we talk about, and then what you might refer to as attributes of those things. What do we need to know about books, articles, people, organizations, and what kind of connections exist between them? I'm not yet talking about a relational database. I'm not talking about connected graphs. I'm talking about the kind of level where policymakers talk about the things they need to know about. That's the layer at which you would reach agreement on terminology. And then contextual sort of packaging of that terminology. The concept of a CV is a scoop of data or a scoop of information out of a larger context that you could get information, but you just want to know a little bit of information about a person. An impact report would be another scoop of information. And so if we can agree on those kind of reporting boundaries, for this business process, we need just these 11 elements to come across the wire. For this process, we need these 23 elements to come across the wire. So if those two things can happen in an agreement mechanism where you agree on these packaging, what we call profiles, they're different from software profiles, but they're not that different. It's essentially a profile is a business agreement around a list of attributes that you're going to need to come across in some sort of exchange. And if we can agree on those things, first, and second, agree on the underlying terminology, the words that we're using and what those words mean, human to human. I'm not talking about semantic web at this point, that's an implementation aspect. But what's the agreement at the policy level? Then with those two pieces in place, which is we feel a very thin layer of reaching that level of agreement, it opens the door for a lot of opportunities for interoperability. It's not a perfect approach, but none of the approaches are perfect. We think this is the least imperfect. Now, interoperability, like the word standards, means a lot of different things to people. In the case of standards, when you hear the word standards, you might think formal, nationally accredited standards, like standards for electricity, standards for different items that are in our life today. Formal standards are one mode of standards development, but also informal standards, or what are commonly referred to as consortial standards development, are a little bit different. They came up in the 80s as a kind of response to the sort of longer, more difficult and arduous process of formal standards development. And they arose in various industries as a kind of the equivalent of a rapid application development step, where if information or some subject matter was not quite ready to be frozen in time or to take multiple years to develop a very stable, never-changing standard or infrequently changing standard, there needs to be another way where we can have a faster way of iterating this. And if the requirements are dynamic still and changing a lot, we can't freeze it for 5, 7, or 10 years. We need to kind of have annual or maybe semi-annual or 3-year cycles in terms of shelf life. And so that's where consortia came up, where in the Wi-Fi industry, the players came together and agreed on the specification for Wi-Fi, but it didn't start as a formal accredited standards process. It started with just groups of leading organizations getting together and say, we can reach agreement faster and iterate faster over a shorter period of time until we get this right to our satisfaction. Then it's prime real estate, if you will, to move into a more formal standards process. CASRA is in that space, that informal standards space, as a consortia. And interoperability, you might also, when you hear that word, you might think, well, Okay, that's a technical thing. That's, well, I guess interoperable. We need to make sure that at the technical level there's the same protocols. That's part of interoperability, but I found this definition by Paul Miller, who used to be at Yukon, used to be at JISC. He's now an independent consultant. This quote came out of an article that I found from 2000, and it's the best definition I've seen of interoperability. I've bolded the key points. It's active engagement. Interoperability is not just about mapping from one system to the other, writing that map once, and praying to God that neither end of that system changes so that you break your map and you have to go back in and do it again. You have to have active engagement from all the key stakeholders, and it's an ongoing process ensuring that the systems, procedures, and culture of an organization are managed in such a way as to maximize these opportunities for exchange. It's a different way of thinking. If the systems, procedures, and culture assume that we will all be using EPrints, for example, or we will all be using this particular Chris from Thomson Reuters or something, if that's the culture, then you evolve different ways of solving your problems. But if you step back a bit and apply a interoperable aspect or dimension to your systems, procedures, and cultures, you start to discover new ways of solving some of these problems that exist regardless of what tools you've decided to purchase. So that's the context that we're thinking of interoperability. So CASRI is a nonprofit global network of organizations. It was founded in Canada. You might have noticed I have a foreign accent. But it's not a Canadian. The C in CASRI is for consortia. It's not for Canada. It just was founded in Canada because the research funders in Canada back in 2006 had to solve this problem. And what they said was, is the only way we can solve this kind of interoperability problem by forcing everybody to stop using one system and use another system, or forcing everyone to have yet another system to maintain in addition to one they're locally using, like a portal concept? And they sent us out and said, what are other industries doing? And we went out and looked at insurance, we looked at the military, policing in the US, and what we found, and retail systems, what we found is that all these stores and all these insurance agencies were not sharing one system. They weren't sharing a build on Oracle or sharing some portal. They were sharing information standards about what they meant by a policy, what they meant by insured, what were the terminologies that they used. And then when they needed to work together, they moved the information around in an agreed way. And that was it. And it was data standards. It wasn't just about data modeling. It was data standards. What do we agree about the meaning of the data that we need to share in our business? And so we went back to the funders and we said, that's how they do it. And they said, okay, let's do it. So we founded CASRI, and then we started reaching out to fund. And we knew that Canada wasn't the only country that needed to solve interoperability problems within the research enterprise. And so now we reached out and with JISC in the UK, and now with the Swedish Research Council in Sweden and in Portugal. There's a number of nascent CASRI national communities starting up to solve this problem. As I said in my beginning slide, we think one of the advantages of our approach is that it can be implemented locally in terms of how do you move information between internal systems, finance, HR, Chris's repositories. It can expand to a national level without reinventing the model, and it also can be internationally connected. If Sweden and other European countries and Canada and the US and South American countries are all agreeing that this is what a person is, this is what an organization is, we're storing it in dozens or hundreds of different ways, but this is what we mean by these basic entities, then you all of a sudden open up these doors while focusing locally and nationally. You're able to connect up internationally as those other communities are doing the same thing as you. And key participants are the institutions, funders, vendors, and libraries. So common interop patterns, I don't know how I'm doing for time. Okay. Common interop patterns, this is really oversimplifying them. A to B, A plus B. When you're going to be interop, sometimes data needs to move from one system to another system in order for the system B to do something then, to take it forward in a workflow. So that's A to B. A plus B is aggregation. It's not that you want to get data from A to B. You want to take A and B from another perspective and get some meaning out of combining the data. So basically, I can't think of any other scenarios that don't fall into, I got to move it from A to B, or I have to take A to B and combine them and aggregate them in some way to get some new knowledge that I didn't have when I was only A or I was only B. And also another key point is coarse-grained versus fine-grained interoperability. Depending who you speak to, interoperability can only happen if you can get fine-grained. Unless you can know exactly how they have modeled and they are storing everything at their end, we can't really achieve interoperability. They're right if your goal is the fine-grained interoperability, but it is possible to get coarse-grained interoperability. I mean, many of the RESTful APIs that are all around us in transit systems, on iPhones, when you want to find out when a bus is coming, those are using coarse-grained APIs where sort of resources that we know it contain the following attributes, and a JSON file is going to come across the wire, and we can just get stuff done. That's kind of coarse-grained, messy, if you will, not top-down coordinated interoperability, but it works. It works everywhere else. I don't see why we can't have some use cases solved by that same approach, but other use cases will need fine-grained interop. So let's work the extra in order, if we all have, if there's community members who want to see the fine-grained, then there's impetus to get it going. But don't assume you can't get anything done until you get down to the perfection level of fine-grained interop. There are many things we could do just by exchanging bulk files. We can move on, especially in the A to B interop patterns. All right, so that's basically a little bit about CASRE as an organization and what our mandate is. Applied to open access, specifically here in the UK, which is the first country that has applied the CASRE problem to scholarly communications. CASRE started in the award application or award reporting CV space in Canada, and it was in the UK where the same pattern was applied to solving some of the scholarly communications interop issues. So key use cases in the life cycle of open access, these aren't all of them, but article submission, moving things between CRIS repository, CRIS, APC reporting, monitoring, policy monitoring, and there's many others. And the working group knows there's others, but in order to contain the scope of their project, they used use cases to figure out what will we try to do first and park things that we know we want to do, but we've got to have some way of containing scope. So here's just a list of the organizations that are involved in the open access, the CASRE UK Open Access Group that Valerie is chairing. Valerie is a co-chair, and Ben Ryan from ESPRC within the RC UK is a co-chair. JISC is sponsoring this project. JISC was an early adopter of this approach, and their goal was to find out how could this CASRE approach work and not work in the UK. What about it works, and how could we tweak it to make it better? And so that's what we're just a few months away from ending that pilot. And we think that we've got enough evidence that we know that it works in the UK, and we can take it forward. So the access profile, I'll put a call to action at the end. The review circle for this group is wide open. If any of you want to assess the outputs from this group, you'll be able to participate in the public review. There'll be an email address at the end if you want to get involved. Oh, sorry about the typos. Basically, the access profile can be broken down into key groupings of metadata: output, metadata, access, compliance, financing. There's other parts of the profile, but depending on the use cases, some parts will be less developed if the use cases have not been applied yet by that group. The profile can grow over time and also be modular. Just because the profile covers all these things, it doesn't mean that you can't drill in just to the output of the compliance components. Again, like I say, this is a coarse-grained view of the profile, but you could also dig in deeper to just the bits that you need for specific use cases. So to take the general use cases and bring them far more specifically into UK context, the post-2014 ref, APC intake, but also Horizon 2020. I mean, European Commission work is also very much within the UK space, less so in North American, but obviously very important to UK community. And also internal institutional workflows. Valerie's identified that there are going to be many internal workflows that need to have use cases developed so that we can figure out what else might we add to the profile, what else might we get out of the profile. But again, it's not the current priority of the working group. That's one of the benefits of the CASRE approach is if you take it use case by use case, you can contain scope, but you know you can park things that you know you're going to eventually want to cover, but you don't have to overcrowd it and try to boil the ocean. And then finally, the next step in the next month or 6 weeks is going to be finalizing the policy view of this data profile. So that's a non-technical view of it. It's essentially something that policymakers can say, yep, I can see all the information that I would need, that if it came across by the technical system that we are using, I know I would get what I would need to move forward and take on the different business processes. Based on that, we'll then have public review and comment, and we'll create a technology view. I've got I think that's my last slide, but I'm just going to, I've got an example output from the current dictionary. It doesn't show the specific items that are going to be coming out of the OA because it hasn't finished yet, but when that work is done, it will, all the outputs, the profile contents will be uploaded to the online dictionary. And the online dictionary has a mechanism where, you know, a human reader a business or a policy reader can understand what's going to be in a profile, but also either as JSON or XML, there needs to be a technical view. And this is just an example of you won't see specifics to open access, but this is just an example of outputting any branch in a dictionary to a simple spreadsheet that you know, it says, will this be a date field, number field, text field, what length, and things like that. So starting to get to more of the technical aspects. If it gets implemented in a relational database.
And just a reminder that email address that David mentioned was info@casrai.org, casrai.org. And next up we've got, sorry, no. Next up, we've got Sheridan Brown from Key Perspectives, Tim Miles Board from ULCC, talking about REOCs. We've definitely got a metadata field so far this morning.
Good morning. My challenge this morning is to tell you about REOCs in 5 minutes. That's a very tall order. I could talk about it for hours, but obviously I won't today. But I am around later on if anyone has any particular questions about any of the elements. Just first of all, a quick show of hands. Has everyone heard of REOCs? Is anyone anxious about REOCs? Is anyone planning to quietly ignore REOCs, perhaps? Okay, well, my advice is don't ignore it, because it was developed for RC UK and for HEFCE, and they plan to use it to monitor open access compliance. It was funded by JISC, it was developed by Paul Walker-Dedina and me, and also all of you and the UK-wide community. We've had various exercises in weblogs, consultations, surveys, etc. Okay, so what is REOCs? It's an application profile. In essence, it's a group of metadata elements and guidelines. And I would draw your attention to this note that says it applies just to publications. It's not about images or research data sets or anything else. Just publications at the moment. What's it for? There it is, enabling funders to monitor compliance with their open access policies. There are just 21 metadata elements, and I would imagine that currently you are collecting at least half of those. It isn't terribly onerous. I'm just very briefly going to go over the 10 mandatory ones. Okay, so first of all, we have an identifier, which tells you what the item is, the object is. The language, that's obvious. The source, which is usually a journal or a book. The title, Now, number 5 is obviously a key one for HEFKI, and the ref is the date on which a publication was accepted by a publisher. We have a field, an element for author, and we're recommending the use of an ORCID. REOX Terms project is really very important to our CUK. You're required to report the funder name and the project identifier. And there's a list of controlled types as well, and they include things like journal articles, book chapters, monographs, ETDs, things like that, but it is a controlled list. And there's also a controlled list for versions. And there are a couple of examples there, including version of record, which is obviously a published article. Finally, there is an idea about license ref. Within REOX, you're required to provide a URI to the original license that could have been created by the author, the institution, the publisher, and that license will give you an idea of the status, the open access status of that object. If anyone's worried about any of that, we are able to help you. And the star event here, Tim, is going to tell you about an EPrints plugin that's been created recently. It was funded by JISC. And for the next 12 months, there is going to be technical help available to you, and that's going to come from 3 areas. EPrint Services will provide help for their own hosted repositories. The University of London will provide help to their hosted repositories, and Peter West at the back there, do you want to wave your hand, Peter? He will provide technical help to repositories that aren't hosted at either of those institutions. Okay, so I'll just hand over to Tim now. Thanks very much.
Web and repositories developer here at ULCC. I'm also one half of the REOX plugin development team. You've already met my colleague Peter, who worked on this with me. So before firing up a quick demo, I wanted to try and briefly talk you through some of the key design decisions that we had to make when we were developing the plugin. As Sheridan said, the REOX plugin, the REOX application profile has 21 metadata elements. So what Peter and I did was we took a long, hard look at the EPrint schema and decided that we needed to add 21 elements to EPrints in order to support REOX. Okay? Now, this might seem like quite a lot, especially given that, as Sheridan indicated, there is some very clear overlap between the REOX metadata elements and the EPrints fields. So title and author are some 2 very obvious examples where you're already collecting that metadata. Okay, but don't worry. What we've done is create a special kind of field in EPrints that works out suitable values for REOX by looking at your existing metadata. So actually behind the scenes, what it's not doing is looking for a value in the database. What it's doing is running a little bit of code that looks at the fields that you have got to work out the best value to present to REOX. So in fact, you don't end up with excuse me, you don't end up with 21 new fields in your workflow. Hooray. Now, this approach that we've taken is also very flexible because every one of your repositories is different, and what our plugin allows you to do is to configure exactly how each of the 21 REOX fields works out a suitable value from your existing metadata schema. So if you've already customized your ePrints repository, for example, to capture some of the data that's required for Reox, all you need to do is just rewire the plugin configuration, and we can pick up the metadata that you're already collecting. Now, having said that, the plugin doesn't leave your workflow completely untouched. So let me explain a bit more detail. There are some metadata elements in Reox for which there are simply no equivalent in the default ePrint schema. So a good example is date accepted. So this is a mandatory field in Reox, as Sheridan said. By default, ePrints only allows you to enter one of these dates, a date of publication, a date of submission, or a date of completion. So what we could have done is very easily just added another option into that list so that you could enter a date of acceptance. However, in the default ePrint schema, ePrints only lets you enter one of these dates. So that's not very useful if you want to capture the date of acceptance and the date of publication. So what we had to do in that case is add a new field to the workflow to allow you to capture date of acceptance. Another good example is the Reox project field. So this is another mandatory field in Reox. Now the factor that we had to consider with this field is that sometimes our plugin can only make a best guess at what a suitable value for Reox might be. So when you install the Reox plugin, the default way that it's going to produce some output for this particular field is to look at these two fields in ePrints. Okay? Now both of these fields in ePrints accept multiple entries, but there isn't actually an explicit link between them. So if, for example, you imagine an ePrints workflow that looks something like this, so we've got 3 project IDs and we've got 2 funders, we're not actually connecting them up. So given this kind of data, what our Reox plugin would do is to produce something like this. So we've kind of assumed that the first project was funded by EPSRC and the remaining 2 projects were funded by NERC. Now, that assumption may not always hold true. So what we've done is given you the option to override what the Reox plugin thinks the value should be with a new field in the workflow. So you can see that what this field is doing is tying together the project ID and the funder much more explicitly. And you can see the radio buttons at the top of the field there that tell the plugin that you just want to use the default mapping, or actually for this particular item, you want to override the default mapping and provide your own value. So taking those 2 factors into account, the fact that there's no equivalent for some Reox elements and some values are only best guesses, we decided that the Reox plugin should add 11 new fields to your workflow. Now these fields are admin only, so when you install the plugin, the view of the workflow for normal users isn't going to be impacted at all. So it's up to you as individual institutions to decide how best to adopt the new fields into your more general workflow. So for example, going back to the projects field, what you might decide to do is take the default ePrints projects and funders fields out of the workflow entirely and just drop in the new Reox field and use that one instead for all future deposits. Okay, I'm now going to try and give you a quick demo. Aha, here we are, okay. So what I've done is I've just got a vanilla ePrints repository with the Reox plugin installed. So hopefully if I log into this, there should be some items already there. Good, I remember the password. Oops. So the way that I'm going to jump in and have a look at some of these records is by looking at the compliance report that we've added. So as well as adding the individual metadata fields to each record in the repository, it's also useful to have an overview of which records are meeting the requirements of REOC. So which records have mandatory fields missing, which records have all of the mandatory fields completed. So it also gives me a good jumping off point to get into each individual item. So what we've got here is a repository that just happens to have 42 outputs that were published in last year. So you can see that the top 2 are compliant with REOCs, and the remainder of the items published in 2014 are not compliant. And for each one that isn't compliant, you can see a list of problems that the system has detected. So if we go in and have a look at one of the ones that isn't compliant, now what I wanted to show you is that the changes that we've made to the workflow. So if I just jump into the workflow here, you'll see that there's a new stage in the workflow at the very end there. So again, this stage only appears to administrators when they log into the repository. And this is where those 11 fields are that we've decided that we need to add. Okay? So what have we got? We've got the REOCs type field. So we've created a default mapping in the plugin to take a best guess at what this output type is. Usually this is, the best guess is good enough, but we've given you the option to override that should you need to. So in this particular case, we're currently using the default mapping, and it's detected that this is a journal article / review. Should we want to override that, we just choose the option there, and then what we have is a list of all the deposit types that REOCs recognizes. Okay, we have a coverage field. There's no equivalent in EPrints for this field at all, so we've just created a multiple value field for you to enter values into. For the language field, what our default mapping is doing is looking at the document to see whether the document has a language flag set. If the document doesn't have a language specified, what we're doing is just falling back to the default language of the repository, which in this case is English. But again, if that wasn't the data that you wanted to expose via REOCs, you can go in and you have a list of languages that you can override with. So there's the data accepted field. So there is no equivalent in EPrints at all for this one. We've got the free to read field. So what we do to work out the value for this is look at the document to see whether it's open access or whether it's embargoed. We've got the REOCs APC field. So this is another one for which there is no equivalent in EPrints already. So Sheridan touched upon Ulcc integration. So what we've done in the plugin is allow you to override the author field if you so wish. And what this will do is actually look up the author names in Ulcc and automatically fill in the Ulcc identifiers for you. So again, you can choose to either use the default mapping, and you can see that it's showing us what the default mapping would be, or we can override it, and if we go in there, we can fill in the Ulcc IDs. We've got the project field here. So again, I touched on that earlier. This is a best guess as to what the appropriate value might be. So if you want to override that, you can see the field that I showed on a slide in the presentation part. Okay, so last couple of fields, we've got publication date. Again, we can very easily pick up a date from EPrints but should you need to override it, the option is there. And finally, we have the version field there. I should mention with the project field, when you type in the funder names, cross your fingers, yeah, so we have an auto-completion list for funders here, which enables you to quite easily fill in the funder ID and pass that data onto Reox as well. Okay, so that's what the changes look like from an administration perspective. So as I say, as an institution, you would likely go through a process of deciding which of these fields you want to expose to depositors, whether you want to pull the Ulcc auto-completion directly into the deposit workflow, for example, and which fields you want to keep at the editorial level only. So there are perhaps some fields here that you don't want to expose to end users, but when they submit, you may have an editorial team that's going through and adding some extra information. And again, it's also, obviously you only need to focus on the mandatory fields. So we've highlighted in this particular section which fields are mandatory and which are not. Now, if I come out of this, so when you actually view the item, what we've done is add a new tab, and what this is doing is just looking at the item and giving you an indication as to whether this particular item is compliant with Reox or not. So in this case, we've got an item that doesn't comply. This is a good opportunity to show you this piece of information here. So what this is doing is telling you which document is actually being described by the Reox output. So in the main, you'll likely only have one document attached to each record, but there is no restriction on EPrints that forces you to do that. So you may well have records that have several documents attached. The Reox plugin will do its best to work out which one it should be describing by looking at the document flag that says that this is a completed version or the submitted version or the published version. So Reox will try and pick that information up if it's there and try and choose the document that it should be describing. So again, if it chooses the wrong one, what you can do is go into the record and set that flag to make sure that it picks up the right document. So this is a non-compliant record. So you can see a list of the issues that it's found. So what we're doing is promoting the issues with mandatory fields to the forefront, but we do also list further down the optional and recommended fields and the actions that you would need to take in order to comply with the guidelines for those particular fields. What we try to do is pull the guidelines through from the official Reox website directly into EPrints. So by clicking on one of these Y links, you get the guidelines exactly as they appear in the official Reox documentation. So if I finally just have a look at a compliant item, so you can see in this case the little tab has a nice green tick to show that this is a compliant item. So again, it's just highlighting the document that Reox is going to describe with this particular record. And as you can see, we very cheaply said for bonus points, please consider adding the recommended or optional information to the record. So at the end of the day, the end result of all of this effort to capture this additional information is the Reox record itself. So what we've done is created an export plugin for EPrints. So this is what EPrints is spitting out, Reox XML that describes the particular record. What we've done here is just to apply a style sheet to it so that it's a bit more readable. In actual fact, behind the scenes, what we're spitting out is something that looks a bit more like this. Okay. The last thing I wanted to say was that all the code for this plugin is available online on GitHub. What I've done is create this new area on GitHub called EPrints UG, which I hope can sort of foster development within the EPrints community. And Reox, the Reox plugin was one of the first things that we uploaded to that particular area. And you'll see from the later presentation that we've also been busy and uploading some other packages and extensions to GitHub as well. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Just before you finish, Tim, and Sharon finishes as well, we've got a quick question from Rachel on the remote viewers. She wonders if anyone has thought about or looked at how EPrints users whose main deposit route isn't through EPrints, say through Symplectic, could take advantage of this. Because of course, if they're depositing through their Chris, it won't come through.
We have one of the repositories that's hosted by Ulcc actually uses Symplectic, and we're working with Jennifer, who is here somewhere. We're working with Jennifer to try and make sure that when they go live with their Reox plugin, we'll be pulling through the information from Symplectic into the appropriate fields. Okay, thank you.
I hope that answers it. Hope that answers the question. Another just quick question before you go from Valerie. Will it supply a click button to report sending to RC UK?
It could do,
but not yet.
But not yet. I don't think that particular mechanism has been well defined. But once it has, there's no reason why we can't extend the plugin to support that. Okay, back to you, Steve.
Are you taking questions from the floor?
Yes. We've also got another question from the floor.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about data deposit. It's a very sort of specific question, and I may be missing something in the Reox profile, but is data deposit in there? Is it going to support reporting for RAF purposes as well as for RC UK?
The question was data deposit, and is it supporting the information needed for REF? Is that what?
Yes, so we've got acceptance data, obviously, but is data deposit in there as a field?
A date of deposit, sorry.
Yes. Deposit, yes. No, that's not part of the Reox specification.
That seems to be the one thing that's missing for RAF, and it would be. I'm a bit puzzled about that.
Sharon, can you?
Yeah, the process was that Reox was originally developed for RC UK, and HEFKey came to the table a little bit later on. We did talk about this, and the fact is that the repositories automatically generate that date so you can capture it. And in due course, there is likely to be a REF plugin or EPrints which will use that exact methodology to capture that date.
Great. So Sheridan just gave an answer, which was that, just for the benefit of those that aren't in the room, Reox was initially developed on behalf of the research councils for the reporting requirements that they required. Some work has been underway since to look at the requirements for REF reporting. And it's not quite joined up. Yeah, just before the next crowd comes on, could I invite Adam to come and upload his PowerPoint presentation if he's got an Adam Field. At UEL. As every other university, we had to meet the needs of the EPSRC requirements for universities to have an adequate infrastructure to support good data management. So David will talk about developing data.ulr repository. Roy will give a couple of demonstrations, one to coin DOIs and the second one to have links between repositories, between a data and a publications repository. And then David will return to talk about the look and feel of data.uel. So David.
Okay, so as I'm sure many of you have been, you've thought about developing a data repository using EPrints. So I'll go through the rationale, the function specification, some mock-ups we used, the metadata schema we used, and some other stuff like relational diagrams. So as you can see, UEL developed their RDM policy back in March 2012. It meant that the library was responsible for creating a register of datasets and a portable for which they can be shared. It was to be separate from ROAR. A few reasons why that is. ROAR is our institutional repository. It's a full text open access repository. We'll use different workflows. We didn't want everything, we didn't really want to dilute that open access message from it. And by having a separate repository allows us to try different things to really emphasize the data element of it without ever crossing over into the ROAR side of it. So ROAR and data.uel are hosted externally. They aren't hosted by UEL, they're hosted by Ulcc, our host today. So to develop them, we gave a functional specification to our developers, Tim and Rory, sitting just to my right, and they created it for us. So we said what we wanted, why we wanted it, and who was going to be responsible for doing it. This is a little example of one of the spreadsheets we sent them. We described what we think we need in this repository, what our thinking was behind it in the rationale. The reason for that was that if there was an easier way of doing it in ePrints, we wanted to take advantage of the expertise our developers had, so we wouldn't be doing something that could have been done better another way or was already in ePrints, for example. And then who was responsible for it? Some aspects of the development would be our responsibility. For example, I was doing the look and feel and the integration with the the UEL website. So we had to be clear about who was responsible for doing each part of the development. We created some mock-ups like the one you can see here. This was so that we were both on the same page when doing the look and feel. The little red numbers you can see there correspond to a spreadsheet which describes exactly what HTML elements the summary page has and where what you see on screen should be pulled from in the ePrint record. And there's the spreadsheet with the HTML elements and any other information. So the quote there you can see again is from the EPSRC. I'm sure most of you recognise it by now if you're getting through with data. It's that we're supposed to use appropriately structured metadata when describing research data. So we took a look at the Recollect plugin and what DataCite require. There's a good spreadsheet going around, I'm sure many of you have seen it, which is what Recollect based their fields on. So rather than reinventing fields for yourself and for ourselves, I think it was important that we used fields that were already created. So we used the Recollect plugin as a base so that we're all reading from the same sheet when it comes to field names in ePrints. But Recollect also has a lot of mandatory fields that we felt weren't really necessary for UEL data. The fields that we thought were necessary were the DataCite fields, the ones that we would actually be using to mint DOIs from. So initially, at least, there are mandatory fields. Oops. Good time in Java? No? We sure? So there's an example of one of our metadata spreadsheets at one stage. I'm sure everyone's got their own version of these and has seen these plenty before, so I won't go into it. Apart from that, the text is very, very small. So relational diagrams. We use these to try and describe how objects within our data repository would talk to each other and would link to each other. Again, it's very small, so I don't expect you to be able to read it all. But the main idea is that this is showing how a project which sits above an ePrint in our instance could be linked to future projects or past projects, and how data sets can be linked together in this one. So this shows how our entire research sort of structure at UEL all links together with external objects and with other internal objects. Again, quite a complicated diagram, but if you've got field binoculars back there, you might be able to make out all the separate links that we envisaged. And we gave this to ULC, who can do some live demos.
Hello. It's live demo time, so please bear with me. As you can see on the slide there, I'm going to demo Coin DIY. Now, as many of you are probably already aware, there is a DataSite plugin for registering DOIs for data sets that exists, but the guys, David and Steve, wanted a little bit more from theirs, and one of the really important things they wanted to do is to have the ability to choose when something gets a DOI. So the plugin, the DataSite plugin, as it stands, as you would download it from the bazaar, will give you attempt to mint a DOI once something goes live, but that wasn't what the guys at UEL wanted at all. They wanted to have control. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of this process. Rightio. So here is an item that I made earlier. We'll just quickly check. It doesn't have a DOI. I shall make this bigger, or attempt to. This can get bigger. Yay. Is that helping people at the back, by the way? Anything bigger? All right. I think that's pretty much we can go. Okay. So as you can see, the DOI appears down here in the unspecified fields. What we're going to do is this has already been made live, and what I'm going to do now is, as the administrator, possibly an editor as well, I can't actually remember off the top of my head, I'm going to coin a DOI. Now what this will do, when it reloads, we'll go down to get a message. Okay, this hasn't coined a DOI straight away. It'll do it's told the indexer to do it when it gets round to it. So that's something the plugin doesn't do, and there's a good reason for doing it that way, is because we are going to wait for the response from. That was quick. Maybe it worked. We're going to.
Worryingly quick.
Yeah, I could have just timed it perfectly. We're going to wait for the response from the guys at DataSite, and there you go. Wish me luck. There we go. See the new one appear at the top there, number 37. That's actually been registered. Only when that's registered. I was going to hopefully show you that it all happened far too quick for me. I was going to show you that in the details here, even after I'd hit Coin DOI, this DOI is still not filled in. However, now it is. There you go. There it is, appearing in the summary view. There it is in the details. And yeah, I shall come back to this in a moment. I'm just going to quickly show you the config. This one. Now I'm not showing the real config, so I don't give away UEL's DataSite password. Very cleverly, just to show. So people who already use the DataSite plugin will probably recognise most of this. I've added a few bits to it, and they're basically down the bottom. So if we nip down the bottom, there's a few extra config items that the guys wanted to to enhance the DataSite plugin with. So you can choose your delimiters. Now this is within reason. If stuff gets knocked back by DataSite, you'll get a failed, a sort of failure message in here. The reason for that will be hidden in the indexer log, so you'll have to ask your friendly repository administrator to dig that out for you, but you can at least find out why a request for minting has been knocked back by DataSite. So if you get the delimiters right, you can choose those. So you see we have a slash and a dot, which in this case, so slash first then a dot. One that I'll show you in a minute is that we are allowing custom DOIs. The other one of note, so we don't, there's a little testing one there, and make this big again, that probably helps. If we use the mouse, we can zero pad our, so it automatically will append the EPrints ID to the DOI at the end there, but apparently DataSite recommends a length of 8 to 10 digits. So you can choose to zero pad your, by as many as you want, really. You could do 7 if you want it to be different. So now what I'll show you, so that's basically the config. There's a few extra bits to it. The last thing I'm going to show is a custom DOI. So let's have a look. So I've got another ePrints item here. DOI not been specified yet. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and very carefully I'm going to write a DOI, and then when I press coin DOI it'll attempt to use that to register it, to register with DataSite. So I'm going to, first thing I'm going to do is nick the bit that I know works. That bit. There. I pop that in there, and then I have EPUG or whatever it might be. Okie dokie. So I save that. Here it is. Okay, so it's popped that in there. You can see it's got a DOI specified. However, that hasn't been registered with DataSite yet. So I'm going to need to go and coin it. So I'm going to hit the button now. Right, let's see if I can catch this task in progress here. Wow, it's going fast today. Okie dokie. So that suggests that it'll be here waiting for me, or it'll have got knocked back. If I get a failure message, oh, there it is. Pops it straight in. I was hoping to show you some of the stuff in action there, but it's it allows you to do that. Now, the guys at UEL are going to be in control of that workflow and filling in the metadata in that way. So the custom DOI field won't really be for researchers, because that would probably just end up in lots of failures and a bit of a nightmare. So because they were taking control of their workflow process, they decided that would be a nice field to have, so someone can have their own custom rims or whatever. Okie dokie, that is Coin DOI pretty much. Just to say that obviously it's based on the DataSite plugin, and I shall be working to bring these two things together such that they're currently it's currently sort of a branch of that, not a proper one on GitHub or anything, but I'll be doing that and then looking to collaborate and merge this stuff together. So we've got a bit of an more of an all-round DataSite plugin that can be available, and it'll be configurable, so you can choose to do it automatically or press the button or whatever takes your fancy. So that was Coin DOI, and on to the other one. Here it is. Okay, so this is a repository link, or repo link for short, and after listening to David earlier about Kazrai, I'm gonna suggest that this is coarse-grained interop. It's the messy stuff, but we'll see. I mean, you can tell me whether I've got that right or not. So I've got a config file up here, which I'll make a bit bigger, but you don't have to look into this too much. The main thing I want to point out is that it's right. This is on a test server we've got kicking around. There's another one here, which is another one, but you'll notice that it's not exactly the same. It's a slightly different one. Really, 2 minutes? Oh, I'll do it, don't worry. So these are pretty much exactly the same, except one has been chosen to be the master repository, and the other the satellite, if you like. So that's the only difference there, is that little flag. This is available as a Bazaar plugin, and they can be the same thing can be deployed on different servers to get these to work. And what this does is that when you are creating, so here in the master data master repository, which we'll say is our data repository, although it's not really set up as one, we will flip straight to the details. I'll put a title, and I'm going to call this, we'll see in a minute why, the phonetics dataset. And I'm going to skip past all that down to the interesting bit, which is this new, better shrink that a bit. This. So what this is going to do now, when I type this, start typing in, it will go, and because it's been configured to talk to another repository that has stuff on phonetics in it. So this, imagine this was your publications repository. We see that we have. It will look up the items in there. You have to do the phonetics. I'll pop that in, and then we get a little bit of metadata that this is just a link, if you like. Save that. Right, this one's already live, and that's important because so this keeps a little bit of metadata here, saying that there's a linked item, and it's to that. Now, if we actually go to this item, which has also had the plugin installed on a different repository, I stress to add, each time this page loads, it will check in with the master and ask it if it has any items that are related to it. So if I reload that now, nothing happens. Hey, okie dokie. I almost got through. This is the very last bit of my live demo. Oh, you might be. No, it shouldn't be. Was it not live? It should be live. Let's go and make this live then. Oh, goodness me. Let's deposit that item. Quick. Deposit that. Yep. Well spotted, Dave. Right, there we go. Now it's live. Because, of course, we wouldn't want people looking up stuff that had been published. That's why I showed you that. It will, hopefully, once this page is loaded. There it is. So it's gone and done a live lookup. Found that there's a related item from another repository. It's phonetics dataset, which sort of, if you imagine you had a data repository and a publications repository, you could get them talking to each other, or at least knowing about each other. Okay, and the last thing I just want to show you before I go away is I'm going to get rid of this now. Bye-bye. All right, no more phonetics dataset. And of course, because we haven't actually stored any metadata on the other repository at all, that will just disappear. And that is the repo link. And that one I managed to put together as an EPM and is available. Come to me for details. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rory. Very quickly, I'll just demonstrate the look and feel of the UEL repository. I realise I've probably run out of time already. But we'll demo it very quickly. As I said, we did the look and feel in-house. So we developed the theme package, which is based on Bootstrap. We'll talk more about that later on in a later presentation. But I'd just like to quickly demo our summary page for an item within our data repository and show the link that Rory just described. So in here you can see the link here to an item within ROAR. We're in data at the moment, and it's an item in ROAR. So if I click on the link, it will bring through the item in ROAR for you to see in our other repository. So that's a little more of a visualization of what Rory's already shown you. And there you can see it in ROAR. We scroll down and we can see the link to the dataset there. We chose to use the UEL blue for ROAR and go with a sort of complementary orange color for data. And hopefully that should keep everyone right. You know what you're seeing when you open up these windows. So I'll talk more about the look and feel, about how we develop that and where that's going in future later on today. before lunch. But I think that's probably all we've got time for now. So I'll hand back to Stephen and to archiving next.
Yes, so next is Matthew Addis from Archivum talking about the future of ePrints integration.
It's probably not the most recent one, actually.
All right, I'll let you.
There we go. So I'm Matthew Addis, I'm from Archivum. Brief presentation of a plugin that we've developed with the help of Southampton for ePrints, all about data archiving. So Archivum in 60 seconds, if you're not familiar with who we are, no sales pitch, and then I'll just go straight into the ePrints integration work we've already done, and more importantly, where we think we might go next, and this is where we really value feedback from you guys on what's useful and important. So, Archivum 60 seconds. We provide data archiving as a service. So, we store files for people for long periods of time, and we guarantee to give them back bit for bit identical to the original files, no matter how long they want to keep them for, and no matter how many files that they've got. That's part of the contract, it's part of our SLA, it's backed by insurance. We do that through a UK hosted service. With on-site appliances that make it really easy to access that service for our customers. Pay as you go if you want to, like any other cloud type service, but we also offer fixed term contracts under a Janet framework agreement, which makes it easy to recover the costs of long-term archiving from research grants, for example. The whole service is fully automated, running in UK data centers, ISO 27001 certified, and we've been audited by pharmaceutical companies, all sorts of stuff like that, as well as Janet doing due diligence on us. So we are a pretty trustworthy place to put data. But if you are worried about lock-in or things going wrong, then we do include data escrow. So there is a complete copy of your data held by a completely independent third party, so that if you wanted to go to another service, bring all your data in-house, then you can get all your data back from that escrow provider with no lock-in to us as a service provider. Right, enough about Archivum. We've got customers in a range of sectors, including universities, several of which are here, which is brilliant. And those universities don't necessarily always use our service directly. They do it through integrations with CRIS systems, institutional repositories, data publication platforms. So this talk is about the integration we've done with ePrints. The integration, it's available as a plugin on the ePrints Bazaar. It's open source. Yesterday I made sure everything was up to date. There's documentation on installing it and configuring it and using it under CC BY. There's some videos online on how to use it. So even if you're not interested in using Archivum, you can go there, you can see how we've done it. You can maybe use that as the basis of integrating your own archive if you wanted to. So this is how it works. Imagine a researcher has some files. Could be publications, it could be images, it could be research data. It really doesn't matter from our point of view. They take those files, they upload them to ePrints in the normal way. ePrints puts those files in its storage. They add some metadata to complete the record. That would typically go through a review approve process by an ePrints administrator. And then those files will then go from the ePrint storage to Archivum's appliance. This is a thing that sits on the local network, looks like a file share, allows files to be ingested into our service. Files though go down to local storage, they are integrity checked, we confirm with ePrints that they've been transferred okay, they are encrypted, and then they are sent up to our service where they are replicated into multiple locations and sent off to escrow. And at that point, they are safely stored and our data integrity guarantee kicks in. So we then confirm the files are safe, which means that a local copy in the appliance can be removed. The files are confirmed as safe to ePrints, and that's added to ePrints audit trail. And then ePrints has the ability to remove its local copy. And then finally, the files can be confirmed as safe to the original depositor, and they can decide to delete the originals if they want to. So whilst the files themselves have gone from left to right into our service, there's a series of messages that come back confirming that they've been correctly received and stored safely. So there's a chain of custody that goes all the way through from the original researcher through to our service with EPrints in the middle. I'm not brave enough to do a live demo, and to be honest, it's a bit like watching paint dry. As Rory mentioned, we've got a similar sort of mechanism. We don't use the indexer, but we do have a job in the background of EPrints that periodically checks for how things advance through this archiving process. That process is typically triggered in the workflow automatically when an item is moved to the repository. So all the files under an ePrint. There is a way of running the plugin so you can choose manually which particular documents might be archived. So the moment something goes into the repository, it triggers this workflow, and there's an audit trail created in ePrints. The administrator in ePrints can see the progress as those files are archived, including when it's secure and safe. So we have this chain of custody based on checksum, so we know that the data's been transferred okay. The data then becomes locked down, so it's immutable, it's read-only. We confirm when it's replicated, the ePrints metadata and audit trail is updated, and then and only then will any copies of data in ePrints be removed. So that's all straightforward. In terms of accessing the data, someone comes along, they find data in ePrints. Maybe they've gone to a publication, resolved a DOI that's pointed to ePrints as a landing page. They see the data's there, and maybe they're asked to request why they want to access that data. Maybe it's a large data set. Maybe there are other reasons for its being restricted. They might be told to wait whilst their request is reviewed and approved. A request to retrieve the files from the service is sent to Archivum's appliance. The files come back from Archivum's service. They're stored in the cache. ePrints is told the files are ready, so the user can be told the files are ready, and then when they access the files in the normal way, they're taken from the appliance through ePrints, and the user, or whoever it is, can copy out their copy and use the data. And that's all well and good, and it looks a bit like this. So you come along and you ask for access to data with maybe entering some justification. That can then be approved by an administrator. The administrator can see the progress of the restore. The user's then emailed when the data is ready, and they can go in and they can click on the usual download link and grab hold of the data as usual. I should say that for small files, that whole process is entirely automated and invisible. The review, approve, notify typically would be used for large files when it's going to take a time to retrieve it. And indeed, we provide a simple estimate of how long that retrieval time might be to the user when they first make that request. And then the files are cached on that appliance, so if they need to be accessed multiple times, then that can be done instantaneously without taking them back from the service again. And all the access control in this model is done by ePrints, so it decides whether to grant access to the data. We're sitting there as a storage backend, which means all the usual stuff in ePrints for embargoing things or restricting things or authenticating users can be applied as usual. However, there are some limitations to the current approach. Primarily because all the data actually goes through ePrints. It goes into ePrints' own storage, which is fine for publications maybe or small data files, but if it's large research data sets, then having to upload everything through ePrints just to put it into an archive might not be what you want to do. Some of our customers have already put files in their archive, and they would actually like to link those into ePrints rather than having to deposit them through ePrints, and that's not possible in the current model. We know that several institutions want to push the data out at certain points to publication platforms like Figshare, and that's not easy to do with the current plugin when it's in our archive. You can't push it straight from the archive to a open access platform. And neither can you grant direct access to the archive because all access control is through EPrints. So I think several of our current users have identified some of these limitations. Certainly I've been talking to Tim and Ulcc, and we think there are lots of things that can be done to improve the way the plugin works to accommodate these use cases. So just for some examples, direct deposit of data into Archivum might actually look like this. And again, it could be any archive, it doesn't have to be Archivum's archive. So you might put the file into the Archivum appliance, and it provides a file share, so it's easy to do that. It then stores it and uploads it to the service. And then you might add the URL to the appliance, so EPrints knows where it is. It could be reviewed, where an editor might go and check the data, and they grab hold of the copy, they approve it, and it's stored. And that sort of links the data in the archive to the data in EPrints. Oh, and when you want to access the data, you get the URL from EPrints to the appliance, which then pulls the data back from the service and delivers it out directly. So here the data hasn't gone in or out of EPrints at all, but EPrints still knows that it's there, and the process can be included in the usual sort of workflow. Or maybe there's a need for something a bit more integrated. We know from working with Loughborough, for example, with Figshare and Symplectic and DSpace integration, the last thing they want is their researchers having to go to multiple systems and doing stuff and linking things together. They actually want a single front end, one place to go to do everything. So maybe there's the need for some sort of uploader where the researcher says, well, here's a data set, and the files are then transferred to the appliance. The metadata is then transferred to EPrints. The link to the files are put into EPrints. The usual review approve process, and maybe that then triggers the approval for the appliance to take the data and load it up into the Archivum service. So only when everything's there and complete and correct does anything get really long-term archived, and so on. But the key thing here that there's only one interface, one tool, one uploader that the researcher uses. And that uploader might be downloaded from EPrints. So they might go to EPrints and pull that down and use it, and then it automates the process for them. I don't know, right? These are sort of questions that we've got on how it might work. And it'd be great to know what you guys want. So some of the work we can imagine being done, making the whole thing seamless, working out what the security model is when you've got EPrints' own model, an institution's own authentication system, and Archivum's appliance. Working out who can deposit the data, who can link the data into EPrints, and who can improve it. So fine, a researcher might put it into the appliance, but then EPrints needs to be allowed access, so an administrator might be able to approve it. There's a whole issue about all the tools and protocols needed for transferring big files, things like grid FTP, etc. Then there's a whole question about the relationship with SWORD and whether we need to have SWORD-like support in the appliance, plus tools for transferring big data. And I know Exeter have been looking at that sort of problem. Then there's all sorts of issues around the sort of metadata we might need to generate and make accessible through the appliance if data is going to be deposited there to start with. And then what does the quality control and sign-off process look like? So all sorts of open questions. And that's why Tim put an idea up on the Research Data Spring to look at some of these things, which has got some fantastic support. It rocketed into the top 10 overnight. So that's great. Archivum fully supports that and would be very interested in being involved. And there's also another Research Data Spring idea up there from Edinburgh and Manchester about the more general problem of how to integrate data vaults into the whole research data management infrastructure. And that extends to things like CRIS systems like Pure or Elements, other institutional repositories like DSpace, and how to link those things into archival storage using an open set of interfaces and standards. So it will be entirely vendor independent. So we support that as well. There you go. Hopefully I'm on time. Hopefully we might have a session this afternoon if people are interested to talk about some of these questions and issues in more detail. In the meantime, there's some links to the plugin and the documentation if you're interested.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I've just got a question from Adam online.
Cool.
He's wondering how long it takes for our user to then download a data set if they're not, say, logged into EPrints, or it's been...
Right, so if the data is cached in that Archivum appliance, which is directly connected to EPrints, then access is instantaneous. The data is streamed straight from the appliance through EPrints and outwards. If the data only exists in our service, then there's a bit of latency whilst that data is retrieved. Our service level agreement says we will start returning data within 5 minutes of an access request coming into our service. How long it is until the whole data set's available is going to depend on all sorts of factors, like how big it is. You know, terabytes of data take, you know, hours or days to download over a network. So to address that in the existing plugin, we've got a really simple model that allows you to put some parameters in to give an estimate of that time. So you can say that the time a piece of data is going to take to be delivered back to the user is a bit of latency, 10 minutes, plus a download time, which is proportional to the size of the data. And those things are added together to give a really rough and ready estimate of how long the user might have to wait.
I'm sure that answers the question. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks to Matthew, and then back up on stage are Tim and David talking about EPrints, but not as you know it.
Hello, me again, him again. And now we'd like to show you something completely different. So, David, what's the name of this session?
It's EPrints, but not as you know it.
Okay, so in this session, David is going to talk about his work to give EPrints a radical makeover using Bootstrap, and I'm going to talk you through a digital archive project that I worked on recently that uses EPrints. So I recently built this digital archive for the King's Fund. That's an independent charity working to improve health and healthcare in England. And the King's Fund are in the process of scanning 2,000 odd documents from 1898 onwards, which are held in hard copy at the moment at their information centre in central London. And they came to us looking for a suitable platform to make those documents available online. So what they came to Ulcc and they presented us with some metadata. So they had they used the CALM system internally. So they gave us a MARC export from that system, and they gave us about 100,000 high-resolution scans of pages of their hard copy documents. And what they'd also done is run those scans through an OCR process. So they were able to give us some XML which described the text within the documents and a plain text version of the OCR output. So one of the first things I did was to take their high resolution scans and put them into our Archivum appliance for safekeeping. I imported the MARC metadata into EPrints. So this is the EPrints based digital archive. The records you're seeing flying past have all been imported from their MARC metadata. So I used the OCR files so that we can do some searches across their document corpus. So here are some example search results. Now, for actually viewing the documents online, the King's Fund were very keen to use something called the Welcome Player. This is a document viewer that was developed by the Wellcome Library that enables the user to navigate through a document page by page and zoom into details on each page. So if I choose one of these, so what I've effectively done is taken the EPrints abstract page and completely replaced it with this document viewer. So this viewer uses a technology called Deep Zoom. So at the back end, I've had to set up an image server in order to serve tiled small regions of the image so that you can zoom in very efficiently and very quickly. The Welcome Player requires, in order to describe how the documents fit together, because what we've got is basically a hard drive full of page scans, to describe how those fit together as documents, the Welcome Player requires some JSON input. So what I've done is created a plugin for EPrints which exports the JSON that the Welcome Player needs to understand how to put the document together. Now, one of the features that the King's Fund were very interested in is the fact that you are able to use this viewer to search within the document. So obviously what I've done is use the OCR information that they provided us with. I've indexed all that OCR information at the back end. So when I type in a search query, that's going off to the back end, and the back end is throwing me back some JSON which tells the Welcome Player whereabouts the words are in the document and what region we can highlight in order to find the word. So there we go. So in summary, using EPrints allowed me to develop a digital archive very, very quickly. It's been launched successfully and we've had some very good feedback. EPrints was flexible enough that I could completely customize it. So what I've been showing you doesn't look anything like the default EPrints at all. And so I could completely customize the look and feel to King's Fund requirements. David, over to you.
Okay, so just following on from what Tim said there, EPrints can look like whatever you want it to look like. You can really customize it quite heavily to look like this. But what about the default install? So I've worked on a Bazaar package which will be released. It was meant to be released today, but it seems to be stuttering a little bit, and I hope to show you a live demo, but I'm not going to be able to, unfortunately. To use a technology called Bootstrap, which was developed by Twitter originally. It allows you to quickly build websites and make them scalable for mobile devices, and apply themes. There's themes, many Bootstrap themes out there already, which you can then apply to that. So I've tried to create an EPrints version of that, and I'll just give you a quick example of that now, if I remember the URL. So Rory very kindly created these images for me earlier today, since my live demo won't work. It is worth saying that if you do want to see this working live on a full repository, we do have one running on a laptop. So give us a shout, give Rory a shout, and we'll show you. So the idea of this is that it's a Bazaar package, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. You install that onto an empty repository, and it will change your repository to look like this, which isn't massively different from the standard ePrints offering, but it certainly, to my eyes at least, looks a bit more modern, and it allows much more customization. It uses JavaScript to update many of the elements you see there, so it's not altering the ePrints core at all. It's just a theme that sits on top of it. It works in the mobile view as well. So it shrinks it doesn't just shrink the screen down and make the text smaller, it reformats for any screen size. So another example there. And it reformats the forms as well, so they're more accessible in any screen size. Now with one CSS file, a Bootstrap theme, which as I said before, there's many available online already. It's a recognised sort of standard for developing Bootstrap. You can change the look and feel, you can change the colour of the buttons, the style of the buttons, the style of the header bar, and many other things. Within the development Bootstrap, I realised that if we wanted to apply this to the UEL website itself, we'd need another way of changing the header images, changing the header files. So there is a way within the Bootstrap package of updating phrase files, which ePrints uses already, and it will include them on your template. So if you have a corporate logo or a company header, you can include the code for that in a phrase file, and it will apply that to the top of the page. All this development has been done within the GitHub, which I'll just go to now. Yes. So this is the GitHub for the Bootstrap work that I've been doing. If anyone wants to have a go, they're welcome to try and download it now and try it out. You can report issues if you find error. And as I say, we'll hopefully be uploading a full package of the work to the Bazaar soon. With it this week probably, for the first version at least, so you can try it out. I'd like to hear if anyone does try out the problems with it, because we've been trying it on empty repositories. I wouldn't recommend installing it on your production repository. I mean, I'm sure it'll still work, but it might not look as you dream it will. But yes. Any questions? Okay. I can't see if there's any questions online, I'm afraid, because I don't have my laptop here. But that means we'll move on.
Yeah. It works. Excellent. So, very excited to be here. I'm here to kind of introduce my new role and talk about the community and what I can do for you, the ePrints community, both kind of this room and the UK community and the further community abroad. And I had a think before I came here. My job title, actually, I wear two hats for ePrints now. One is the ePrints Services Business Relationship Manager, and the other one is, I guess we'd call it the Community Engagement Lead. And I had to think about what this meant, and I came up with these three kind of general areas that are going to take my attention. To understand and promote community priorities, to support community interactivity, productivity and outputs, and ePrint services engagement with the community. And I guess what that really means is that I need to be, to a certain extent, led by you. So I would like to have engagement from you, and I'm hopefully going to use some of the time I have in this next 6 minutes or however I got to open the room up to see if anybody's got any comments for me. So a number of you would have seen an email that came out from me. I sent out on the tech list. I posted it on the EPrints User Group asking, what are your priorities? And this is the feedback I got back from you. Everybody pretty much said documentation. A lot of people said that without any context, so more explanations needed. We had a number of comments about communication from EPrints, about roadmap, about more development, more features, and then some kind of a tail at the bottom, better website, capture community needs, developer meets, which, again, looking at the top of this, documentation, communication, these seem to be the key requirements people are immediately aware of. So in terms of documentation, I would hope we could have perhaps a discussion session about that today. If anybody's interested in joining me, I have a number of ideas, but I think this is something that does need to be community-based. I think everybody's got something they can offer in terms of documentation. You know, we at ePrint Services, we have a lot of very technical people, and we're very good at writing technical documentation. And actually having a look over the documentation, there are large areas of ePrints where the documentation is actually very good. So actually coming up with, well, what documentation do we need, I think is actually a challenge to begin with, to think about how to best attack that problem. So if anybody's interested in a discussion session this afternoon around documentation, I'd be very happy to join that. So better communication. Well, we have the new role that I've stepped into. I'm making my contact information public for the community. Feel free to give me a call, drop me an email, ping me on Twitter to talk about anything that you feel is a priority for the community. I'm currently working on, not just for the community, but for ePrint Services, a communication strategy. We're rebuilding our website at the moment, and hopefully we'll be launching that in the next few weeks. And if there are any other channels of communication that you think we should be using, please do let us know. Particularly, I'm interested if anybody has any ideas on how to reach other ePrints communities outside of the UK, and particularly outside of the English-speaking world. I'm very interested in engaging with those communities too. And finally, a roadmap. We'll be talking more about this afternoon, but we have a planned roadmap to take us through to the end of the year, which we'll be discussing this afternoon. That's essentially, I don't really want to hold people up from lunch. Yay! I feel I've introduced myself. Does anybody have any questions? Or does anybody have anything they would like to raise? No?
Just to say it would be quite helpful to have an organisational chart of the ePrint services so we know who does what. Because usually you as our contact for us for development, but we don't know.
Sure. So we have, as part of the work on the rebrand, sorry, the question was about the structure of ePrint Services, and we have, if I can use this trackpad, we're currently working on relaunching our website. At the moment, we have kind of a Meet the Team page here, which outlines who is on the team and what their roles are currently in ePrint Services. This is kind of buried at the moment, and it's on kind of a pre-development website. Our current development website is actually private while we get it into shape, but we will certainly have be publishing the shape of the organization and who sits where in it. If you have, essentially, if you have a project with ePrint Services, you should have a named contact that you be able to contact. If you have any other concerns, feel free to contact me. Any other questions? Excellent, I think I'm done.
Well, thanks, Adam. And of course, those of us in the room can continue to pester him all the way through lunch if we do have any questions. But those of us that are here will be breaking for our swan fricassee now through the double doors at the back there. Those of you that are attending virtually, we will meet back with you at 1:30. John's. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is John Beeman, and this is my colleague who many of you will probably know already, John Salter. We're going to talk about user access control. Some people call it the access control layer, or ACL. It's the same thing, really. And we are literally going to take it in turns. We've been developing this together, and so we're going to present together, basically, and each sort of chip in as and when. That's pretty much it. So, off we go. Do you want to take it on?
So at the last user group, we said that we were going to do some work on this. We said we had 2 weeks put aside for it. That was nowhere enough time to write something like this. It's a vast under-exaggeration of how long it takes to write an access control system. But we've spent 2 weeks locked in a room with no contact to the outside world other than a pipe full of caffeine. And I think it was only at the end of that 2 weeks we realised the sort of enormity of what we were trying to do. It has been horror. I think that's fair to say. But it's been a really good horror in some ways. We've learned a hell of a lot, and we're close to having a system that you will be able to use on your repositories. The focus for our work has been around our research data repository, but you could plug it into any EPrints repository, and the configuration of that would you'd be able to customize to the type of data or the type of access control requirements you have for that repository.
Yeah, I mean, when John says it's been a horror, if any of you have had your wisdom teeth removed, if you imagine that without anaesthetic and maybe multiply it by 10, it's probably been a little bit like that, but it has been really enlightening in the sense that it's enabled us to get right to the core code of EPrints. So just to give a bit of background to this, as far as what you get out of the box currently with EPrints, it's got basic security, and that works at the document level, and it works via a value in the security metadata field. Now, as far as what the values are, that value could be public, which essentially means that document is open access. Valid user means basically you can access that document if you've got a valid user account on that particular instance of EPrints. Or you can have staff only where access is limited to, for example, editors and administrators. And basically, that's why there was a requirement to build an enhanced and a more granular access control layer, because often that doesn't cover the requirements anymore about as far as what is actually required on some of the repositories.
So what are the requirements for an access control layer? So it's not only controlling access to the documents, the files, but it could also be controlling access to the metadata of the EPrints themselves. Now, I know EPrints is built very much around an open access model, so lots of stuff's out there. But sometimes, you might want to restrict certain bits of metadata. You may have certain types of file that you always want to lock down that have got not non-redacted sort of things, or that haven't been anonymized. So the requirement is not just the document level, it's the EPrint level, but also any other data object level, so you could have a project data object that you might want to restrict access to certain parts of that as well. And then who or what gets access to the things that you're locking down. So the easy side of the equation is these are the open access things, you can all get them, go for it. The difficult part is working out where you draw your lines, who or what systems can get access to the things. So across the room here, I'm guessing that some of you will have your ePrints repositories hooked into your local kind of sort of university login system. Others might have it hooked into something like Shibboleth to provide a sort of federated access management. So somebody from another institution can sign in and get some of your things. You may also want to sort of lock things down to just campus-based users. All these different variations, as many as you can imagine in a big grid, and that grid's about 10 layers deep as well. It is silly. And one of the things that we need to do is try and provide that in a simple way that your average sort of repository user or repository manager can actually say, I'm confident I'm assigning the right rules to this item, and the right people will be able to get to it, but also the wrong people won't be able to get to it.
Okay, so as far as the actual access control layer goes, what can we say about it? Well, first of all, it's a modular design. So first and foremost, it's not going to overwrite any existing security. So we've already mentioned that at the document level, you have the security field. That is not going to be altered in any way or overwritten. Another important thing is it will be available as an ePrints plugin. So there's no actual code hacking that's required. It's literally you get it from the ePrints Bazaar, you install it on a repository, and you then have the enhanced ACL. Basically, we'll talk in a few moments about the way in which this ACL framework is structured. But we have things called ACL authority modules or ACL authorities, and those are the things that govern the different methods of authentication. Now, just for the technical people in the room, or possibly for the pedantic, there are two distinct things which often people confuse, which is authentication and authorization. Authentication is basically where you are going to see whether that person is the person who they say they are by checking a username and a password, etc. Authorization is once somebody is authenticated, what rights or permissions do they have? So once you're satisfied that they are who they say they are. Now we've called these modules ACL authorities. I suppose we could have called them ACL authenticators, but the reason why we call them authorities might become clear later, because in a sense from those we get more than just the authentication, we get the authorization as well with the information that's passed back from them. Now the ACL authority modules can be dropped into the existing framework. So to give you an example, LDAP would be one thing, Shibboleth would be another. These are all ways of authenticating users and then passing back information to the system about that user.
So the things that we've developed, things that form part of our workings, as John just mentioned, the authorities, which is you've gone ahead of yourself.
Oh, sorry.
So yeah, these are the ways that people are allowed to sort of sign into your system. So then we have roles, which is almost like the authorization that John was just talking about. So it may be that somebody signing into your system on using a username, a university username and password might be a member of a certain group. Maybe they're a member of a staff group or a certain research group, and that will give them access to a certain role. So it may be that once I've signed in, I've actually got a researcher in bioinformatics, and I can have access to a certain set of data with that role. With these things, the roles that an authority can assign are obviously based on that authority. And as I said before, we don't know half of what things that you might be using to sign into, The idea is this is when you create the authority system, you can then define what roles or what groupings or what sort of filters that will allow you to restrict users based on. Does that make any sense? I take silence as a good thing. So as I said here, this filter, so an LDAP authority and it's a member of Leeds at AC.UK or a member of, say, the library at Leeds at AC.UK. And then ACL groups are a way of combining roles in a way to say, to basically make a set of users easier to apply, or a set of roles easier to apply to the actual ePrint or document. And those can be applied either, all of the requirements have got to be met, or any of the requirements got to be met. So you could say on campus, or signed in via Shibboleth, or you could say signed in via Shibboleth and a member of a certain research group. And then these groups are applied to the data objects, the ePrints or the documents or whatever other data objects you're trying to restrict access to. And again, at that level there, ANDed or ORed.
Okay, so that's the sort of framework that we decided upon. Just a few other sort of little details more about the way that ePrints works. There's a distinction in a way between a request and a user. A request is something that ePrints processes, and it can do that before you log in, for example. And so there are two basic steps to authorize access. The first is you look whether the request should be granted access, and then you go to look to see whether the user has access. So the sort of, if you imagine the workflow or the steps taken to do that, ePrints first checks if the request has appropriate access rights. So when we were talking about, for example, restricting on IP address, or in other words, location, a user may not have logged in at that point, but the one thing you can do is you can check the IP address and you can see whether that particular IP address is allowed access to the relevant item in the repository. If so as long as the anonymous request, if you like, is allowed access, then you need to, ePrints needs to ask, okay, is the user allowed access then to this ePrint or document? So then you do those checks. And obviously you deny access if none of those requirements are met.
Dealing with objection. This isn't how we feel with ePrints. Or it might be in sometimes, but so what happens if somebody is requested an object and they're not allowed it? Are they not allowed it? They're not allowed to know anything about it. Have they got a URL that somebody's given to them and it's not suitable for them? This is something that comes up occasionally with ePrints currently, where ePrints is very good at exposing the metadata of, say, all the documents, but it may be those documents are locked down. Something like a library catalog will harvest them. Users end up with a link that just is broken. It doesn't do anything useful or helpful, and it just makes people think that things aren't working. So as part of our work, we've created the ability to generate document landing pages. It's much like you have an ePrint with the URL, get to that and it shows you what documents are attached to that ePrint. This allows a document to have a landing page and show that it belongs to part of an ePrint as well. So if somebody's is not allowed access to that document, they at least get to a page that says what you've tried to access does exist and it is what you think it is, but you aren't allowed access to it. You might need to sign in, or you might need to request access at this point in time. At the same time, as I mentioned before, with the ePrint, there may be certain fields within the ePrint that you don't want to expose to people that don't have access to it. So the restricted summary pages, you can then say, for this ePrint, you can select a citation style and say, for somebody that's got access to it, they get all the information. Somebody who's not allowed access to it, maybe they get the 5 metadata fields that constitute a DOI data DOI record. And then also trying to be useful, saying this is locked down, but if you want access to it, you can come and ask us for it, or if you sign in via this system or you have this following rights, then you should be able to access it.
Okay, just to add one last thing to that as well, as far as the document landing pages go, another motivation for having those is basically the idea that you might, for example, mint a DOI at the document level as opposed to the ePrint level. And so, for example, a lot of work that I'm doing at the minute with research data, part of the art of inserting research data, if you like, into a repository, depending on the size of the data set and its nature, is deciding on what you class as an ePrint, and then from underneath there you have all the documents, etc. So you might have a DOI at the document level. So that was another reason for needing to do that. Okay, well, summary page citation style. This is still partly connected with what we do if a request is denied. So as John's already said, you could just have a broken link, but obviously that wouldn't be much help at all. And so what we decided upon was that if the user is requested for, is denied for any reason, then we can have different citation styles. Or citation style, one for restricted and one for not restricted, but then we've sort of opened it up, so in actual fact you can choose any number of citation styles, so you can deal with any type of permutation, if you like, of restricted access. And again, just to make the point that one of the reasons behind this is if a user is denied access to a particular item, let's say it's a document, that document may have a DOI minted against it, and there are certain mandatory fields which a DOI requires, and so therefore at the very least you would like to show the user those mandatory fields but not show them any other metadata about the document. So that's basically where that idea comes from.
This feels like a bit of a bit of deja vu here. So what he just said, and what he just said, and what he just said.
Do the next one.
Right, so I'll go on to the horrors. That was an easy slide. So the horrors and the solutions. So out of the box, EPrints does things, but it does things in a way that it's very open access, and it's done like that for quite a while, 10 years-ish, maybe not quite 10 years for the EPrints 3.3. But lots of these things are really ingrained in the depths of EPrints code, and to try and sort of extract those to plumb our system in, but be able to put them back in when we don't need our system in place, and so you can add this without breaking what's currently there, was a nightmare. So we learnt some really cranky Perl foo, and I think there's still more that we need to learn, because some of it doesn't look elegant. It works, but it doesn't look elegant code-wise, and I'm not quite sure I've got quite the right magic yet. So EPrints out of the box has a summary page sort of export plugin that it uses to render summary pages, and that works if you create a new data object. So if you create a data object called bread, which I think the example on the wiki uses, it has a summary page, and give it a summary page citation format, it will use that. Documents don't. Documents are a special case out of the box. So again, you have to unplumb all that to try and do the right thing for these document summary pages. And so we've achieved that using ePrint triggers. So this is we've put quite a bit of information on the wiki, and I think at the end of this we've got a link to the wiki
Yes,
page.
we have.
This presentation was sort of initially written on the wiki as well, so this is all there, and some sort of explanations of different bits of the geekier side of ePrints and the code and how different requests come in and are processed, to try and help you understand what we've done and why we've had to do it in a certain way, but also so you can look at it and go, that's wrong, if we've done it wrong, which we hope we haven't. And then there's other things that come along to trip us up slightly. So things like Apache, different versions of Apache will deal with things like IP addresses in different ways. So again, we have to make sure that we're plumbing these things in right. We don't know what you're running, so we have to try and make the right decisions to be able to run these things in the right way, no matter what you are running. And as I said here, EPrints 3.3.13. It's been quite a while since there was a major release or a release of EPrints, and some of this stuff is already sort of on its way, but we've had to sort of make sure that we're up to speed with it as well. Do we do this?
I'll do it. Yeah, this is 2 of 30, by the way, the horrors. Yeah, I mean, without going into detail, just basically once you get into the code, we've been really wrestling with inheritance. We won't bore you with the details, but it's the way in which you get different functionality to all work together, if you like, and things like that. And so that was quite good fun. And another thing is a lot of things use sessions, and sessions are sort of a way of keeping track, if you like, of what's going on in a particular request stream. So that could be a user who's using a system but has not yet logged in, for example. The only problem is EPrints doesn't quite use sessions in that same way. And so sessions are only created when a user actually logs in. And so the business that we mentioned earlier to do with first you check a request and then you check a user. If you imagine you have an ePrint or a document and the only restrictions on it are connected with IP address or location, so in other words, you're not interested about whether a user's logged in or not, then you can get problems basically if you're trying to develop an ACL system, because you need to be able to try to keep track of things, and basically ePrints makes it a little bit difficult. And the last thing is the documentation. Yeah, well, as we put there, perhaps it's offering room for improvement. And so hopefully what we're hoping is that with the ACL work, also goes into great detail about the inner workings, if you like, of ePrints as far as dealing with requests, and then what we've actually done to produce this ACL framework.
So we were going to do some kind of live demos, but then we were told that we've got to use this laptop, and we can't get from this laptop to our office back in Leeds. So we've got some boring screenshots. So sorry, there's no live demo. It's probably good that somebody's taken the temptation away from us. So the ACL groups and roles appear much like any other data object, if that's a term you're familiar with. So you can manage them through normal ePrints workflows. They're just like any other thing. It's just that their purpose is a bit special. So these are, yeah, you've seen these kind of screens before. You can't read them. This one says it all works lovely. So basically, on our test system, we were making various sort of rules, trying to make sure we test it in a thorough way that, if I think I'm blocking something based on an attribute, I'm blocking it only on that attribute, or it's saying no when it should say no, and it's saying yes when it should say yes. This is just a screen to show you the definition of a role. It's fairly simple, no massive rocket science in there. The only big bit of rocket science is this filter field here, which is based on the authority that is signing in against. And so obviously we can't pre-guess what that's going to be. That could be number of space shuttles in orbit at this moment in time. We don't know. It depends what the authenticating authority will allow you to filter your users on. But basically, you give it some friendly titles, you give it some descriptions so people can actually know that what they're applying is the thing that they think they're applying. Much the same with the groups. So the groups is where you then just add these roles in. So do a bit of typing, John S's laptop or desktop or something, and it'll suggest which one it is that you want. You select it, and then you say whether you want them combined in all of these rules together or any of these rules. And then this is the main bit in the actual ePrint. So we kind of think that a lot of the groups and roles will be defined by a kind of repository managery type role. But then this is in the normal sort of ePrint, adding an ePrint kind of workflow. So again, so you have your Reox one first, and then the access control one second, maybe, I don't know. Fairly simple screen, select some groups, and then this is the where you can say for restricted, this should really be restricted summary page display format. So that will control what people will see if they're not allowed access. Can I do it for you?
Yeah. So basically, all of those are just showing that, as John says, all of the roles in the groups, and then applying the groups to individual ePrints. They're all part of the normal workflow, and they all appear as you would expect, as you would edit any other sort of parameters. Okay, so just a few screenshots of actual items now, actual ePrints. So we mentioned near the start that one of the requirements was that if ACL was not applied to an ePrint or a document, then what should happen is it should revert back to the security value, which is associated with documents. This is an example of an item, and I know it's very hard to read at the back, but basically this is an item that has no ACL applied to it. So in other words, it's reverting back to normal out-of-the-box ePrints. Now this nice wacky design was there just to show you that it's a different citation style, because what's happened here is the ePrints is actually restricted, and what we've said is right, okay, if the ePrint is restricted, show a different summary page. So remember when we were talking about just showing a limited, just as an example, a limited number of metadata fields, for example the mandatory DOI ones. That's what all of the hatches there represent. It's the fact that this is not a normal rendering, if you like, it's a restricted rendering of that item.
We just needed a way so we didn't go mad and thought we were looking at the wrong thing. So it's quite clear to us that's a certain thing.
Yeah, and believe me, those hatches, they do send you mad after a while. And then and then this one is almost deliberately very minimalist, but all this was showing is it was just to make the point that what this actually is a document landing page. So when we were talking about a document landing page, so this is not an ePrint now, this is a document, and if you've got a telescope at the back, you can read, it says this document is part of, and then it gives a link to the actual ePrint. So just to say, as John's already mentioned, on the wiki there is all of the information regards to this presentation, but also a lot of other stuff to do with the ACL. Those are our contact details. Any questions?
Have you considered how it's tying in with the exporters? Because it's been seen in the past that exporters don't necessarily respect things being hidden.
Yes and no. So part of the unplumbing of ePrints that we've had to do is trying to make sure that on a normal ePrint summary page, if you look at the source code of it, there's all sorts of links to things in there that you might not want links to appearing. So it may be that you're saying an ePrint's restricted and all the documents are actually invisible underneath that. So we've been trying to make sure that we have a way that we can actually unplumb those bits from being shown. That doesn't quite fully go into all the export, the kind of multi-layers of the export. So an ePrint export that then exposes all the documents. We will have to test that and see how it works. And also, we're kind of we have to be quite careful. You don't necessarily want to restrict. It's quite difficult to what I'm trying to say. You don't necessarily want to restrict everything in all circumstances, because if you're, say, exporting all these items, the fact that they're restricted, you need to expose that information to a controlled, sysadmin kind of export, but you might not want to expose them to a Joe Pub.
Good afternoon again. We've kind of been sidetracked a little from the Powwow report by our announcement of the roadmap, which we really want to focus on for this session. We think for the people in this room, it's a far more interesting presentation. And I wasn't at the Powwow, and I don't know what to report back from that. Sorry. So I don't know if anybody noticed, but a few days ago we did a release of EPrints. Did anybody notice? Oh, one person. Excellent. 3.1.13 is out now. I had a look at... 3.3.13 is out now, as of the 8th. It's nice to be able to say that Apache 2.4 support is one of the things on it. That was something John was asking about earlier. I had a look down at the GitHub comparison page between 3.3.12 and 3.3.13 and tried to get a feel for what was just kind of a bug fix or a stability improvement and what was actually an improvement to a feature that made it do something a little bit better. And we think we can count, I think it's 22 different things that have been improved. But this is very much kind of like an Apple keynote. We've released a new operating system. It has 1 million new features, and some of them are just buttons a different color. So these are things that have been improved in 3.3.13. It's out now on files.eprints.org. I don't know that there's much more that needs to be said about that.
No.
So, on to 3.3.14, where we actually have a couple of features planned. So it's going to be the standard minor release, continued bug fixes that you see with live software. But one of the things that's been really satisfying about this user group is that when we originally released ePrints 3, it was all about plugins, and we built this plugin infrastructure so that the community could engage and produce plugins for ePrints, and that didn't happen a great deal. People still edited the core to build their functionality. So in ePrints 3.2, I think, was the big headline feature was the Bazaar, where we had these one-click installable packages that people could develop. And it's so great to come here and see that things like this access control layer are being developed as Bazaar plugins, and the stuff Rory was demoing earlier with the bootstrap thing and bringing these in as Bazaar packages. But one of the comments we get about the Bazaar is people are a little kind of unsure when they see what's available in the Bazaar. There's no way to judge how stable or how approved or how good these icons are, because that's really all the information you get. Is you get kind of an icon and a small amount of description, and if you're lucky, there might be some documentation somewhere. So the new Bazaar features, we're planning to create some way of saying that this plugin has been approved by somebody, and that could be ePrint services, it could be Ulcc. And be able to create badges that are stamps of approvals and channels to say these things come from these people and tie together. And then Zapier faceted search by default is going to be the other kind of switched on feature in 3.3.14. And we're hoping that will be coming out well before Easter. That's the plan. Any questions?
If you have ePrint services, is there a policy about when we can upgrade, or is it as and when we choose?
So ePrint services, we run our own kind of code base that generally has the bug fixes in it already. So pretty much everything you have here, if you are a hosted customer with ePrint services, you already have without having had the upgrade. And then we kind of the releases of ePrints catch up with ePrint services code base. So as soon as we fix a bug, we tend to apply it to our own internal code base that we use on our hosted customers. We do have ePrint services is going through a process of virtualizing and upgrading all of our hosted customers. and that will be happening within the first, I think, quarter of this year. I'm not, sorry, where are you from?
I'm from Sussex, so we're actually not hosted. We host ourselves, but we do support contracts, but I presume it's similar.
I'm not 100% sure, I'm afraid. Perhaps have a word with Sheridan. He's somewhere around. He knows more about. Sorry, Sheridan. Sheridan sat at the front table here. He knows more about our policies for the difference between our hosted and our non-hosted contracts. I need to find that out. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wondered about EPrints 4, because we did a brief mention of that previously.
Yes, you're 2 slides ahead. So we should talk about EPrints 4, but in the context of that, we should talk about also EPrints 3.4. So we have a kind of an intermediate release on the way to 3.4. Sorry, on the way to EPrints 4, which is EPrints 3.4. So the philosophy around EPrints 4 was about stripping out the layers of functionality that sit on top of EPrints and building kind of a tight engine to handle the data and to handle the storage, and then on top of that being able to build these layers of functionality for rendering, for searching, for import and export, to be able to kind of build a repository the way you wanted it to be for whatever your application was. And we sat down and we had a look at EPrints the way it is at the moment, and we think there's a way to get a lot of that with a lot less of a kind of a service gap between the 2 platforms, and a lot less in terms of the effort in bringing that forwards. So our plan for EPrints 4, which, sorry, I kind of just talked this slide through pretty much. Sorry, I'm running out of steam, Liz. I have to apologize, I'm quite tired today. I haven't been sleeping very well. I'm also not used to talking at this level.
I'm here as his minder.
Yes.
So you'll know that when we Adam's recently rejoined ePrint Services from our institutional IT solutions provider. Anyway, so he's got comes back to us with a whole load new experience. And one of the things we did was to sit down with the management team and look at the plans that we discussed with the community for ePrints 4 and the work that Seb previously, and to try and work out what it was we were trying to deliver and how to do that in a way that didn't create this enormous ravine in terms of, oh, we're just going to completely re-implement it from the ground up. And make it difficult for people who've already got their own repositories, make it difficult for us when we're hosting people's repositories, and to create this gap in the code. We're trying to work out how to do that. And so ePrints 3.4, as Adam says, is kind of like a stepping stone in the way that allows us to get a lot of the way there without actually doing a radical change of the code base. So you've got. Do you want to? What do you want to do?
Sure. Well, we can continue on this
yes,
slide.
Absolutely.
So the idea around 3.4 is that we have this kind of base ePrints which handles just the generic data storage and management of objects in the repository, and then as we said, kind of plugins and metadata schemas and bazaar packages that sit on top of it that create a repository. As you would expect a repository to be. So the problems with ePrints 3.3 in that sense is that, and this is, I spent 2.5 years working for, as Les said, the IT services department in the University of Southampton, and one of the things I was doing was building repositories for data. And I found that the first thing I had to do would take ePrints out the box. I needed to put a data set into a repository, was to turn off a load of stuff and then see if it still worked. And there was always a little bit of massaging to bring ePrints back to that kind of well, it's there and it's stable, but it doesn't really do anything, and now we can start building up on top of it.
I'm
Now,
seeing a few wry smiles across the room at this point. Just I mentioned that for the people, for any remote observers over the internet.
and that's one of the challenges in building a repository for something that's not an academic publications repository, and we're seeing a lot more need for repositories that aren't academic publications repositories. So what we're planning is to build this kind of solid base layer, and then on top of that, and the kind of the metaphor we have here for you is a pizza. So we have this solid base which doesn't really do anything, and then on top of that we put our toppings, and you can end up with a Hawaiian pizza or a mighty meaty pizza. And if you want a mighty meaty pizza, you don't have to pick any of the pineapples off to get there. So we're planning the base, and we're planning some collections of plugins and metadata schemas that are tested as working together for initially 3 different purposes. So open access publications. So if you install the open access publication stack, essentially you'll get something that looks almost exactly like EPrints 3.3.14. And that's what will come out. If you ask for open education, so this is the publications kind of stack we've got. This is what it may look like if you turn your head. And we have a metadata schema, we have things to import and export, we have things for reporting, we have things for rendering, we have things for statistics, and this is EPrints kind of as it looks now. And then if you wanted an open education resource repository, we would have a different metadata schema installed. Perhaps you'd have MePrints, because this is a kind of a more personal, you want to engage people a little more personally. The bookmarks and collections, and an interface in the style of an EdShare repository, perhaps. And then if you were looking at open research data, we'd have you'd have the same base, and then on top of that you'd have another metadata schema for data, and then perhaps you'd have some of the bizarre packages that are suited to data, Archivum, Recollect, storage plugins for large volumes that you have running at your institution, mechanisms for uploading large files to your repository. I guess the final example is, it comes back to bespoke single-purpose repositories, and Tim just demonstrated one of these this morning, where he had a repository which was a collection of books, which were scanned images of books. And again, you've got a kind of a bespoke data set and a renderer and perhaps an importer, perhaps an exporter, but it's a lot tighter, a lot simpler than the metadata schema you'd expect in a publications repository. Any questions?
This is very nice, thank you. If you had a data repository or open access publications repository, and say a couple of these micro repositories, would they have to be set up as separate instances of ePrints, or could you, like you have at the moment, have them one instance with lots of collection views?
It depends on. I could see a case being made for either argument. The more you have going on in your repository, the more complex it gets. So the microdata repository, for example, this is about having data that the repository is aware of the structure of, and it makes it browsable and it adds functionality. So with Tim's example, with these pages that are zoomable, this is almost a kind of a single application for a repository. You might want that on a website by itself, so you might want a repository by itself for that. Whereas if you're storing some data sets just as almost monolithic blobs in a repository, then there's perhaps a case to be made that might go into a publications repository if you wanted data sets in there as well. Sure.
Just further to that point, one of the complications with Perl, the technology underneath it, is that when you have ePrints, all of your plugins are always available. So if you have 3 different repositories, all of the plugins for each of them are technically available to each of the 3 of them. So if you have 3 different things, each one has 3 times as much atom.
Yeah.
So they're slower than all bloated and rosy. So if you have 3 separate ones, each one's smaller.
So this isn't set in stone yet. This is a proposal that we have for how we'd like to go forward. We need to discuss it with the community. So beyond this, clearly, is that the last slide?
This is the last slide.
Oh, that's the last slide. Beyond this, clearly, then when we've got to this stage, and we can see, sort of what we're trying to do is pull out the complexity from something which, as Adam hinted, is very much like a mighty meaty Hawaiian barbecue chicken pizza, where you have to pull out the bits that you don't want. Where we can see that this is where we've got things much more simpler, much better demarcated. Then we can move on to refining the code base, I think, because most of the requirements that people seem to have at the moment is not for lots of whizzy new features, but for supporting sort of lots of different agendas that we've seen coming up on the horizon over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, and are really coming to be sort of business critical now for libraries and for institutions. Is that fair enough? Great. Okay, thank you very much. Oh no, hang on. There's a
one quick question. Eminently sensible, looks like a great way of architecting it. Backwards compatibility for all the existing plugins out there? Or will they need to be re-engineered to support the new architecture?
As far as 3.4 goes, we don't envisage a great number of changes to be able to get us to where we want to be. So one of the experiences I had is in turning everything off to be able to build a data micro repository. One of the things I turned off was the Dublin Core export plugin, which broke rendering abstract pages. Because that functionality, the reason for that is that if you look at an abstract page of an ePrint, it's got a load of meta tags with Dublin Core fields in to assist with Google indexing. So if you turn that off, it tries to generate an abstract page. It can't do it. So this is kind of the class of problem that ePrints 3.4 is trying to solve, and that's just about kind of unpicking the dependencies that the ePrints base has on the publications repository configuration of ePrints. Going on to talk about ePrints 4, that I think it's premature to be able to comment on how much can be compatible and how much can't be compatible with that. But I don't think there's the plans are to make things as sustainable as possible, of course. But I think with 3.4, you can be fairly confident that things that work in 3.3 will work in 3.4. Tim?
Hi. Just sort of picking up on the comment that you made about the website that I presented earlier. One of the key things for the King's Fund is the search capability. So whereas ePrints gave me a really nice way of rapidly putting together a digital archive for them, actually the next iteration of that is going to be based on, well, is already implemented, and it's based on Elasticsearch, because that gives me so much more search functionality, and that seems to be very key for the King's Fund, but I think it's very key for every user of ePrints. So I wondered if you could comment on where you're going with this most important feature of ePrints.
Oh damn! I knew you were going to do that. I'm not sure what you mean by Elasticsearch.
It's a new search engine.
It's a new Borry?
It's a new search engine.
Oh,
It's a bit like Solar, only different.
Oh right, okay. Well, we obviously, if it's new and people want it, we'll be very keen to see how we can pull it together. But yes, I'm sorry, you catch me off guard on that one, I'm afraid. We'll come and talk to you about that.
one of the interesting discussions I'd like to have, what as a technical kind of area, is somehow speeding up the core of EPrints. EPrints is fine if you've got 10,000 records in it,
Yeah.
50,000 records, but when you have 500,000 records or 1 million records, it starts to struggle.
We've got one with what, 20 million records in it?
Yes, yes. So we've got a couple which are adapted for Twitter that we've talked about a couple of times, which yes. So the many of the changes for that will come in the transition to 4.0. I think that would be one of the design aims for 4.0.
I'll just echo that. Thank you for the roadmap, but also because I like a very good roadmap. Des says that it's not set in stone yet, so do let us know how we can formally feedback, and if we can feedback, I think they're helpful. But I think also, you're right that the demand is about changing repositories and those sort of things. But I think also the traditional use, the publication repository. If you compare how you add an item into ePrint with ResearchGate or Mendeley or something like that, they don't really compare. And there is an argument that trying to sort of look at how an academic has to use it, how we can make that nicer to use. And even some sort of user testing, where we watch how professors in history try to upload them in course or whatever. So I think that that core basic interface hasn't changed radically for the last 10 years or so, and I think there's scope there for looking at that in the future.
Yes, I think you're exactly right, and I think it was interesting. So Tim's presentation on the work they're doing for REOX just sort of brings to mind the fact that so we've seen with Pure and Symplexic and other services that there are different. It's not just you can gussy up the user interface to make it nicer for people, but there are whole different modalities of collecting information that repositories haven't necessarily responded to. And as you say, we've stuck with lots of things that are the same. And I think there are, especially with the changes in different agendas, open access agendas, and pressures for different things, including REF, then it may well be that we should be thinking much more creatively and imaginatively about how we're going to get all that information that comes on. I've been very struck listening to people, listening to the CASRI talk, listening to REOX, thinking about the complete disconnect between policy, funders, policy setters, librarians, institutions, academics, and how difficult it is to even from one side of a funder to another side, the difference between the people who enact the policy and who implement systems versus the people who take the decisions, and how much gap there is between sort of those. And so I think we really need to be, and this whole issue of standardization, I think we really need to think creatively, and this is a very interesting opportunity for us to do that now. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So here in the room, we're now going to break for our discussions. We're going to have one group until our tea break at 5 to 3, and then another one from 5 past that are in the room. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If we could have the first group, which was the group on data ingest, sat at the first group, and the reporter to come up and report back to the rest of the team. Oh, have I?
That's right. Just because.
Shall I say that again for the benefit of those?
No, I think they heard it. But we can,
shout loud enough.
how should I explain? Nope.
It was what it was.
It's already open.
Yeah.
I'll just message them online. I'll give you a quick thumbs up.
Okay, so could we have the first two groups up, please? One from data ingest and one from open access, ready to follow straight on. Who's reporting back from data ingest? You need to speak into the microphone for the benefit of the off-site users.
I don't know, it depends how much people hate what I have to say, really. Just going to see if I make that a bit bigger. To read it from a distance, lovely. Okay, so the data ingest group, I think there's been some overlap with the datasets group, who also looked at data ingest a bit, because obviously the issues are interrelated. My name is Liz Jennings and I'm working at University of Bath and I'm working on the research data repository there, but I've also just been taking notes, so that's why I've got voted in to report back. So we looked at mainly, there are two different use cases where there are problems. For small amounts of reasonably small files, EPrints is fine because it can do that for publications. So the issues are in data sets that contain very, very large files. One person had tested up to about 7 gigabytes before it starts timing out and giving up. But essentially uploading very large files over HTTP is a bad thing, and especially if you're using an external storage solution, the files are having to go round the houses, and there's no way at the moment to tell EPrints that a file is located in a specific area of an external storage location. In the case of media files, we also found use cases where people were wanting to then use the repository version as the one they linked to from their blog or other websites. So it's not necessarily the case that you can hide the very high quality files away in an archive and sort of point to a lesser version in ePrints because people are wanting to use them directly. In terms of those, there were quite a few suggestions to do with how we might be able to do that. One might be to provide a desktop tool that did all the routing for you, so it sent the files to one place and then told ePrints where the files were and did that and pushed that through to ePrints with the metadata. There's no obvious way of pointing towards external storage right at the moment. If you're using documents, you have to upload them through ePrints or it can't find them. And there are some use cases, for example, in Loughborough, where the size of the data set determines where it's stored. So in a way, you've got to be able to point to a range of different storage locations. And making that seamless for the user is one of the biggest challenges right at the moment. So, sorry, I'm just going down to a second half. One suggestion was that it may be, if an external service is used, that an iframe might be a good way of interfacing with that system, but then it's very, very hard to link that back to ePrints and connect it with the metadata. The other use case that we looked at in much less detail was the issue of very large numbers of very small files, typically provided in zip files. We're quite confident that ePrints is actually quite good at handling those in terms of getting the files in, but then doesn't do a terribly good job of rendering them in a nice browsable file structure and things like that. But we think that's a reasonably easily solved problem, and it's certainly something that for us is quite a priority following May the 1st, that we think that's an issue. Obviously, the other issue with any of these things is when they're going into an external location is how do you then manage the access control, but obviously solutions are coming forward for that. That was data ingest.
Thanks very much. The second group, if the reporter would like to come up and report back, that was on open access, metadata specification.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Smith from St George's, University of London. So at our table we discussed open access and ePrints, problems and what we'd like to see from ePrint development. Something that was mentioned was, where was REF in the ePrints release roadmap of the versions coming up? We didn't see any mention of REF in there. So it's very welcome that we see REOX as something that we can use for ePrints to help us with monitoring for REF, because that's obviously a big priority now. For anyone that hasn't realised it, we are expected to be depositing author-accepted manuscripts on acceptance from the 1st of April 2016. So that is like doing the REF next year. So we need to get our systems working as well as we can and get through any difficulties that we're having. So there's some key bits of information. Date of acceptance, yes, we can key that in for use with REOX. Date of deposit, I understand that that's harder to determine or establish or pull out. So is there a way to expose more fields and be able to report on them? And yes, different versions, if we're having different versions put in for the same publication. There was discussions around the actual metadata for the files, dates of deposits, and date of acceptance, and how to lock certain bits of information down and how to make others a bit more variable. Yes, so obviously REOX is very new, so people are going to be implementing the plugin, and hopefully out of that implementation where people use it, we can gather some more community knowledge and guidelines and expertise. We'd like to see ePrints as well working together with system suppliers. Obviously, some people in the room just have ePrints, other people have CRIS and ePrints, and we have specific concerns about crosswalking data. So I don't know if there's any scope for like specific groups looking at data coming across from other systems into ePrints. That's especially true of that router that keeps getting mentioned. You know, it's getting mentioned in things that JISC are doing as if it's something that we can all use, and I don't know whether we can. What else? Yes, the issue was raised if a record is created that hasn't got full text deposited at the start. How will REOX handle that? We're guessing that it will say that it's uncompliant until something gets uploaded. So yeah, it's great to see REOX, and you know, looking forward to working with it to see how we can use it for REF compliance. And a final point is that the other system suppliers, there's obviously a lot of data about publications in these other systems. So institutions may be considering doing monitoring through the other systems. So that's just to be borne in mind, is like, you know, other, what did they say, other pizzas are available or whatever. Yeah, okay then, thanks very much.
Thanks. And then if the reports from the third group come up, that was on data sets, metadata for data.
Okay, I'm afraid we did stray quite heavily into data ingest pretty much from the get-go, and then continue to talk about data ingest almost entirely. I'll go for the metadata stuff first. It seems most people are still planning to use Recollect, as that forms the solid sort of base. Some are planning to install it, and then someone said this, install it and then sit it in front of an academic to see what they would need and what they could use from that, which seems like a good idea, rather than just us trying to work it out, like let an academic actually do it themselves. There also seems to be a desire to move away from the standard Recollect plugin and maybe move towards either a better plugin which does a bit more like Reox does, but for data metadata, or move away from using a plugin at all and just use a standard metadata schema. But I think it's important not to start reinventing new metadata schemas at any point. We didn't really talk much more about metadata other than that. In the next version of ePrints, we were just talking about the future version, version 4, about how it won't really have a metadata schema by default, so you can easily add them on top of that. So creating a data repository sounds like it will be much easier in future versions than it will be in the current version. I also mentioned that UEL, and I don't know if anyone else is thinking along the same lines as us certainly, but UEL plans to allow the upload of a metadata file as part of the documentation for a dataset. We envisage this as a sort of subject-specific metadata, possibly stuff that we wouldn't normally look to capture in a standard ePrints workflow, but is useful for discovery of the dataset and for people to reuse the dataset. Looking at the data ingest, we said a lot of similar things to what the data ingest table said about using external tools to host your data rather than ePrints, and using ePrints simply for the metadata. We talked about using Dropbox APIs or possibly Figshare as the host for the data or the ingest tool. We also talked about how it could be possible to use ePrints for a distribution copy and hold the preservation copy on Archivum or separately. This could get around the size problem in ePrints of if you've got a 25 gigabyte, say, dataset, do you feed that through the ePrints interface back to the end user, or do you make that available on request? We also talked about, Adam talked about the one repository for one dataset model, which sounds very promising, certainly for some datasets where you have the end of a project, you create a whole repository for all that data output. It makes it very easy to search through that repository for individual pieces of data within that, and it makes presentation of it much easier too. So that sounds like it could be a great way of doing it for some, certainly. I think that was about it. We strayed into Bazaar as well. I can say now, just while we've got the microphone, if anyone has any ideas for updating and improving the Bazaar, Adam is your man to talk to. He's taking the lead there. Yeah?
Yes, please do. We are going to refresh the Bazaar in connection with 3.3.14. So if there are any ideas, David was talking, you talking about screenshots?
Yeah, screenshots, yeah, in the Bazaar, yeah.
Screenshots, being able to upload screenshots of Bazaar packages in action, links to documentation pages, things like that, and any other ways that this can be improved. If you can get in touch with me with your ideas, and we'll see what we make of the 3.3.14.
Okay, so for everyone who's the remote viewers that couldn't possibly quite hear Adam there, just saying if you have any ideas for the Bazaar, for the 3.3.14 version of ePrints, email him and they can start looking at that and implementing it.
Fantastic. The fourth group was looking at impact. Have we got a reporter? Let's talk about impact. We do indeed.
Hello, it's Mickey, the University of Glasgow. I sort of kind of led this impact thing because at Glasgow we've started to look at impact and developing a kind of vanilla ePrints repository to store impact data. Basically what we've done is just created a new type, a new workflow for impact, and this is based around a kind of standard set of metadata fields. Well, not a standard set, but a set of metadata fields given by the research office to record impact. Things like who you collaborated with, different activities that you've done, dates and things like that, and also a set of categories, like a kind of subject tree, of it, things like just different sectors that the impact is impacted on, things like education, business, those types of things, society. And also the fourth stage of the workflow is you can upload any evidence of where this impact has been noted. Essentially, having talked around that, we sort of, the two groups that I was in, we sort of thought, well, what is this impact linked to? Is it linked to kind of researchers themselves? Is it linked to their publications? Is it linked to projects that they've been involved in? And how long do these impacts last, and how do you actually go about storing them? I think both groups decided it was a really good idea to start looking into this, and everyone seemed quite keen to kind of share best practice on that. So what I propose to do is just post out the kind of work that we've done in our test repository, and people kind of comment back on it. Basically kind of share best practice for anyone who's interested in taking it further forward. That's about it.
Now, the fifth group was looking at theses and data sites, so we could have a reporter.
Okay, hello, I'm Helen Cooper from the University of Central Lancashire. This is the sort of summary of the first discussion group. We were looking at theses and data sites, and really we started off talking about this because it came from a meeting at the British Library, which was looking at assigning DOIs to theses using data sites and looking for funding for a research a research data spring sort of project to get this kind of issue thrashed out. I think a lot of us started from the point of view that allocating a DOI to a thesis was quite straightforward. You just have a thesis and you allocate a DOI, but I think we found some other issues. One of those is linked to the Ethos UK ETDC metadata schema, which is now outdated because it tends to be tied to the thesis as a print format, and the British Library are looking to update this. But we felt that allocating maybe a data site's DOI to a thesis will allow linkages, if you like, to be created between all of the elements coming from a project. So you've got the data sites, you've got theses, publications, and linking them all together while they actually remain separate entities which can be used in different ways and cited in different ways. We also felt this was a good opportunity to introduce RDM at a research student level. So they're starting producing research data plans and so on and so forth. Okay, we then went on to look at what a thesis is and decided, well, it's an evolving concept. You've got issues to do with PhD by publication. You've got the thesis bit and then you've got the publications bit. And you've got the idea of linking a thesis to publications where it's a PhD by publication, or to publications where they're just offspring from the thesis itself. Okay, then everybody began to talk a lot and loads of ideas came out. Hang on a minute. Okay, so we've got, what are you applying the DOI to? What's the basic unit? Is it the thesis itself? Which version of the thesis is it? And so on and so forth. What's the relationship between the elements? You've got your narrative, you've got your data, you've got your publications, you've got patents which come out of thesis, and then you're relating the thesis back to a project and data sets from that, where you have a PI with their publications, their data sets, and then they have students working under them all producing different theses. So you've got a very complex relationship going on, and you need to be clear about what these relationships are and what level we're talking about. We then finished off with looking at all the different variables to do with where you apply the DOI, what stage, what platforms, different software, whether you've got CRISs, you haven't got CRISs, and again all the usual questions about how you make the deposits using stored deposit by email, on media, you know, handing a CD, here's my thesis and its data, before or after assessment, and when you apply the DOI in that case, all those different cases, and where the British Library comes in all of that. It also depends on a separate repository for theses, as with data sets. Mediated deposit by students. Does the student make the deposit? In which case, how do you give authority for them to do that? Lots of different ways of doing that. Who approves it? Is the supervisor involved? Where does the Graduate Research Office come in? And so on and so forth. Yeah, that was it. Lots of questions, no answers.
So in fact that issue will be explored at the workshop being organised at the British Library on Friday. Unfortunately it's sold out, so if you're not already signed up you can't go along, but we'll be reporting back on that in a bit more detail from Friday. Now there was a mysterious 6 group in the room on any other business, so I wondered if they had anything that they wanted to report back. Possibly.
Hi, yeah. There's not exactly an awful lot to discuss. It was sort of loosely labelled communications, discussions, possibly subtitled whinging. But essentially, certainly the first session we started off, we had a varied conversation, mostly with Adam from EPrints, about what we sort of saw as the things we quite like, and that when we were saying we'd like more documentation, we were meaning things like familiarity with EPrints and how you get it to do things, and the fact that some of the existing wiki seems to be room for improvement, slightly out of date, but
Not true.
lacking.
It's not quite what we said.
It's not quite what we said, but I was being political.
All right, what we said was Adam was going to write all of them.
And it was really it was perceived that there's something of a gap between the basic administrator documentation and the very technical stuff. So, for instance, how you go about installing, configuring ePrints plugins. There was sort of lacking documentation on that sort of front that people would like to see. The suggestion was that possibly the Bazaar update might or does already include the creating wiki pages for every plugin, and it will at some point in the future with one of the future roadmap steps. And then we discussed some various bits and pieces about some intricacies of various plugins and where to go to get help with configuring ePrints, depending on whether you're a hosted solution or a supported solution or an entirely independent solution. And that was probably about it. Certainly anything I've got a note on. Any other suggestions? No, blank looks from the room. Marvellous, thank you.
Thanks very much. So now I'll invite Adam Field, in fact, to come up and lead a discussion, an open discussion, wishlist development for ePrints, what needs to happen next. The floor is open.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I should say the floor's already open, so I don't have the floor.
Are there any questions or comments for Adam?
So one of the things that we did actually talk about at the table at the back, the wildcard table, was there was a request for more, I guess, technical events or more meetings for technical people or discussing technical issues. I don't know if this is a response to ePrint Services really only regularly running administrator and repository manager training. That might be something to open the floor with. If we were offering some either kind of ad hoc developer days for this was, how did you put it? You would.
I think it was supposed to be a gathering of people to have a look at issues but not specifically solve problems.
All right, so
don't come to us going, we want to have this in our repository, but more, I'm trying to work out how the hell to do this, and I've spent 3 months banging my head on the wall, and I don't understand it, like searching.
So if there were some community events based around that, or perhaps ePrint Services ran some paid for training courses or technical events.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, no.
To complement what ePrint Services already does, recently there was the powwow, which we brushed on earlier, which was a collection of ePrints developers and plugin developers who got together here at Ulcc to discuss. It was a sort of community support, really, about the difficulties of developing, how you can help each other develop, and I mean that could be one of the solutions to this problem, a sort of community effort to get together. Formal training from Southampton, and a similar to this, but just for developers version, which runs in between the user groups, and then feeds back into them. That's sort of what we pictured initially, at least. Whether it works out like that, I don't know. How does that sound? Does that sound this sort of community-led development approach? Since it is an open source project,
I'm very much trying not to tell. So I've been put in this position where I've been given kind of this job title of ePrints community lead, but I don't see that as that I should be leading the community. I see that as I have lead responsibility of all the people in ePrint Services for interacting with the community. So I very much don't want to say, hey, let's have some events, everybody come, because I don't know if that's what the community wants.
Well, I'm not going to stand here and speak for the community. Just I mean, whichever approach works best for the community. Sorry. You know, I think the formal training from yourselves would be great, and equally as you know, that a sort of community-based approach would work as well for developers just to come along and chat to each other. So whichever way it works out, I'm sure it'll be better than not having it all like we have now. Right. But certainly there will be a developers powwow coming up again in the next few months, I believe. But I don't know who will organise it.
Yeah, the developer powwow is quite good, and I think the idea of having it in between the user groups, so these are places where we connect together the user groups to find out what people need, and then maybe at the more developer focused event we find out how we might do that as a community in supporting each other. I wonder though, because I know there's potential significant input from overseas to ePrint, especially Australia, and I don't think that it's quite viable to, or maybe we could, I don't know, how's the online people, how they got on today with
Yes, if there's anyone online not in the UK, can they give us a shout on the how are they communicating?
They're here. There isn't anyone actually from outside the UK saying anything at the moment that I can see. It's mainly William Nixon. Hi, William. He might be outside the UK. I don't know. Adam. Adam's suggesting hack these.
potentially. I would be very interested in organising, or rather hosting, hack days, community documentation pushes at all levels. So don't think that's just something the developers should sit down and do.
One thing, like any of these events, if it's going somewhere, it's difficult and expensive. You know, for me to justify we're going to go to a hack day and we're going to end up writing a wiki page isn't really something that my institution is going to justify a couple hundred quid to have a train fare for. So I think a lot of these events should be maybe, I was talking to everyone, I was suggesting maybe first Friday afternoon of the month we'll have a virtual meeting and we'll do some ePrints hacking or some, some ePrints masterclasses, how to brand your repository, so people at pitch at different levels for different audiences. People come along to the ones they need a bit of help. There's going to be an audience of, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but proficient ePrint developers to help less proficient ePrint developers, and maybe every 6 months something a face-to-face or or maybe a day before one of these meetings or a day after one of these meetings have a hack.
So I'm kind of very aware that none of our online audience heard a word of what you said, but it was actually quite a sophisticated message, and I'm not sure I can paraphrase, but I'll have a go. John Salter, I got your name right, didn't I? John Salter is saying that travelling, train fare and time off work to go to a hack day or an event may be difficult for a number of the people in the community. I think probably for most of the people in the community, if this is something that's done regularly, and maybe something like a monthly, I guess, virtual meeting, virtual hack session where some output is gained from this. I think you're also talking along the lines of some kind of webinar where and this is the idea of webinars is certainly something I've been thinking about too. I do want to, I understand what you're saying about traveling, but I do think if we can bring people together into the same room, the productivity is so much greater than people sat in different, but I certainly wouldn't discount running virtual events.
Can I just chip in the actual formal training, particularly if you're going to change how the Bazaar package is done and sort of relaunch Bazaar packages? It might be really helpful to have a formal training session on how to turn the stuff that's being done to specific repositories into a Bazaar package that other people can use, and what you should and shouldn't do. That would be particularly useful, I think.
Right, so it's Liz from Bath.
Yeah.
So Liz from Bath is saying that formal training on how to turn pieces of development into Bazaar packages is something that would be valuable. Certainly we can look at running that.
You're getting a lot of agreement from online. Everyone likes the idea of teaching webinars and a mix between virtual and physical stuff. So this all sounds good with online.
Great. I will say somebody raised the Australians. They did the most commits of non-ePrint services people in the Queensland University of Technology, the staff there do an amazing job committing their bug fixes into core.
So when are you going to have an EPrints User Group in Australia? And who's going to pay to get you out there?
Les isn't paying
attention. Isn't Open Repositories next year going to be in Queensland?
No, I've heard rumours that it will be there. I don't know if it's been decided.
Start saving up.
I don't think Daniel will fly me to a user group meeting in Australia.
So, in terms of development wish list, because we haven't really talked about this at all, what are the key, I guess, if we start with the ones that are perhaps easiest to achieve, what is the community's development wish list for the next minor version of ePrints, as in 3.3.14, whether there's anything that can be snuck in there, and then further on talking about 3.4 and version 4. Aside from the things I guess we've already discussed today, is there anything that anybody is champing at the bit to get? Oh, excellent.
I've got a version 4 one for you.
I've got my pen ready.
A lot of Perl packages, actually CPAN Perl packages, are either thread aware, so that they parallel task more efficiently, or they're written in C. So if some of the core ePrint stuff could be either thread aware and or written in C, that would speed up the core of ePrints quite significantly, which would make everything that sits on top of it faster.
So Ian Stewart from Medina has asked for ePrints version 4's base to be thread aware or written in C to speed
Just
up.
the core?
Just the core.
Just the core.
I'm just repeating for people. I feel a bit silly doing it.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
It might be easier if it was easier to update licenses. We've had a long time waiting to get Creative Commons 4 repository.
Is this just as in a string to tag something with a license?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is not. There's not really a development feature. It's more configuration option. Sorry.
I know we're waiting for the upgrade to do it. So I mean, it would be weird, but.
It shouldn't need an upgrade. I mean, it is effectively when you. It's just the metadata field on which values you have in it. So it is. There is a. It is the task is technical in its nature to update the licenses, but it's not a complex task. So we can talk about that, about how to achieve that.
Two quite simple ones: click editable fields and drag and drop file upload. So rather than having to click through to be able to edit something or to show file upload, you just drop.
The drag and drop file upload should work.
Oh, really?
I believe. I don't think we've tried it angle.
Okay.
I believe it exists. So you just drag file onto the document, upload. Okay. It doesn't there. It's in the bottom.
Is that perhaps browser defined?
It may well be browser, yeah. If you're using Internet Explorer 6 and the screen.
So sorry, I don't know.
James from Goldsmith.
James from Goldsmith has asked about drag and drop file upload and click editable metadata fields. But when you say click editable, presumably you mean from the abstract page,
So
or
rather than having to click edit to fill in a field, you just click in the field and can type into it.
Yeah.
It would just make things much more efficient.
Indeed.
A lot of that stuff is probably really easy to do if you switch to jQuery as the JavaScript engine.
I think that's a target for version 4.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot of that is pretty much out of the box for jQuery. Really easy to do.
Yeah, I'll vote for jQuery instead of prototype too. We have an online one from Valerie in Glasgow. She's looking for more open access, comprehensive field inclusion. So working closely with Reox and GIST.
I believe she'd asked for that.
Yes. So yeah, it's a pretty easy one.
So I think this ties nicely with the model for version 3.4 or version 4, where we should be able to just stack metadata schemas and features on top of a kind of an agnostic base. So if Valerie can finalize her schema, then we can look at developing it.
So they're having a meeting on Friday.
Hey, are we done then?
Yes. Done for next week. Adam from University of London asked for a better file upload, I think, which we've talked about already, and metadata harvesting, improve that.
Metadata, well, what does metadata harvesting mean?
Sorry, University of Liverpool. University of Liverpool, I don't think. Better metadata harvesting. I think he's typing right now to tell us.
Okay.
grabbing metadata from files, so extracting it from files.
Ah, metadata extraction from files. When you talk about good extraction of metadata, you're really talking about some kind of import plugin. Are there industry standard files with rich metadata in that can be extracted from? I know I've not really been in this field for about 2.5 years, so I don't know what advances have been made. But automatic metadata extraction from full text documents has been kind of dreamed about for years, but nobody usually puts the metadata into the documents, and parsing for it is problematic.
There is metadata in things like Word documents.
Yes.
However, they tend to be the metadata that the secretary put in 5 documents ago when she
first installed.
You know, so actually it doesn't apply.
Yeah. If there are industry-wide practices that are used which will make automatic extraction of metadata from documents tenable, I think it's a really important thing to do if it's a feasible thing to do.
I know Peter Murray Rust has been doing a lot of work looking at trying to parse PDF files to get titles and authors and things out of them.
Yes,
I don't think he's got hugely far, but he's very interested in it.
As Jonathan Online points out, that this is already done in EndNote and other bibliography managers. Things like EndNote extract metadata, author metadata from publisher PDFs already.
All right.
So, if they can do it, things like EndNote mentally, if they can do it.
We'd like to see funder data being extracted as well, I think, from acknowledgement sections.
Share the code. If they can get it into EndNote, share the code.
You go and tell EndNote that.
Because if they can get it from a PDF into EndNote, then it could go from PDF into something else.
Well, if the publishers are marking up their documents with good metadata, and we have the rights to extract that.
EndNote isn't extracting metadata, it's finding a DOI on the first or second page of the PDF and then going to Crossref and retrieving the metadata from Crossref.
So it's not metadata extraction, it's finding a DOI and going and looking stuff up.
Yeah.
But sure, I mean, there may be something we can do with something along those lines.
Yeah.
We can.
It's a valid technique.
Yeah. Have we exhausted the development wish list? Have we got any other comments, any other business? No?
So it's just down to me to conclude the day's meeting, but before I do that, I just wanted to say a few thank yous to Liam and to Frank, and especially to Nuwa for organising this event, not just here in the room for us and our many different ways of eating lobster at lunch, but also those joining us remotely. The operation went so smoothly, so thank you all for that. And to my colleague David and to Tim and Rory from Ulcc for putting the show on as well and putting together the agenda. To all of the speakers, all the way back from Valerie this morning, joining us virtually from Glasgow, all the way down to Adam talking about the future directions. I want to thank you all, but also for you as participants in the discussion groups and remotely. And just a couple of final points. Recordings will be available and they'll be going up on ULCC Events YouTube channel, so we'll share details about that and the slides will be made available. And apparently you will be getting an opportunity to give feedback electronically sometime soon. So if you've got some comments to give, good, bad or indifferent, then we'll be able to take those on board. And finally,
if anyone wants to join us, I think we're planning to head to the College Arms pub for a quiet pint after this, as it's been a long day, and we've earned it.
But if not, thank you and goodbye.
Excellent.